No way. I never imagined waking up one night as a freaking crown prince. The dull-hand magic stone pulsed with an eerie light before him. As he drew closer, a surge of raw power coursed through him, sending a chill down the spines of Silva and Olivia as they trembled in pure terror. Unfazed, he pressed on and snatched the stone into his grasp, determined to purge the malevolent dangers swirling within it. Rewind to the beginning. He opened his eyes to a goddess who declared his reincarnation was at hand. His destiny was his to forge. After a pathetic first life, she offered a spin-on. A legendary rare gotcha. A golden ticket to a life overflowing with peak fortune. He's got zero memories of his past self or his cause of death, but hey, that's just how the Ice Sky tropes roll. Itching for a fresh start, he follows the goddess's urge and cranks the lever. The result? A super rare white gold gotcha pull. The capsule bursts open in a blinding flash, bestowing the toxin decomposition skill. He's now a human antidote. Poisons, toxins, and germs won't even leave a scratch on him. Before he can even lodge a complaint about the niche skill, she kicks him through a portal into a fantasy realm. A world governed by stats, magic, and monsters. The boy reached out, clutching at thin air with a million questions, but he was already gone. Now, a gentle breeze wafts through the elegant windows of a high-end mansion. Ein jolts awake, having passed out at his desk again. He was just dreaming about the moment of his reincarnation, a life-changing event that went down. Exactly 5 years ago. His head is absolutely throbbing. It's likely a side effect of experimenting with toxin decomposition, the power that nukes every poison and germ in sight. His latest lab test involved eating mold he found outside. Success? Yes, but the price was a splitting migraine and a body that feels like it's made of lead. Even though he vaporized the mold instantly, he can't help but feel this skill is a total dud. Refusing to live a life of suffering again, he vows to keep this weird power under wraps. He bolts when the lunch bell rings, knowing his grueling training session starts right after the meal. Out in the courtyard, Ein's wooden sword is a blur. He pours every ounce of his soul into every single swing. To his shock, his father, Logos, actually grants him some praise, noting his form is finally looking decent. Logos is a big deal, the Grand General of the Kingdom of Heim, the most powerful nation on the map. The House of Roundheart rules the Great Port and wields massive political clout, even within the capital. Ein figures he owes this cushy, noble lifestyle to that lucky super rare gotcha pull. Suddenly, Cammy and Green stroll into the yard. Logos' face lights up instantly. Upon hearing that the chosen boy's training preparations are all set, he showers the younger son with affection, claiming he already sees the aura of a holy knight within him. Then the mood shifts. He coldly orders Ein, his firstborn, to keep grinding alone while he goes to mentor the prodigy. As they head out, Green flashes a punchable, smug smirk at his older brother. Green is the son of Logos' second wife, born just 1 year after Ein. But there's a massive catch. His skill is on a whole different level. As the eldest, Ein got stuck with toxin decomposition, a skill most would call him at best. Meanwhile, the second son landed Holy Knight, a unique S-tier skill in the kingdom. His father isn't evil, but the gap in his expectations for the two brothers is a literal canyon. Haunted by the power gap, Ein pushes himself to the limit daily just to stay relevant. Gasped out and drenched in sweat, his eyes lock onto A. Heavy-duty practice dummy-clad in reinforced knight's armor. The boy scans the area, making sure the coast is clear, and squares up against his metallic foe. A passing guard spots him and warns that the armor is way too tough. An impossible feat for a kid his age. But impossible is exactly why he needs to do it. With a sharp intake of breath, he lunges forward, desperate to somehow bridge the gap and earn his father's gaze. His wooden blade slams into the cold steel armor with a deafening crack, and the resulting shockwave rattles his entire skeleton. The guard chuckles at his stubbornness while Ein nursed his stinging hands. Later, back in the mansion, he decides to stop letting his brother's shadow consume him. If he's going to prove his worth to Logos and Cammy, he'll have to outwork everyone. Effort is the only thing he can truly control. He dives into his studies, transcribing ancient texts until the golden sunset turns into a star-studded sky. The butler arrives to call him for dinner and is floored by the mountain of completed research. Ein apologizes for the hyper-focus, but his dedication. is nothing short of legendary for a 5-year-old. The servants secretly whisper that he's a general in the making. The praise turns his face bright red, and he offers a humble, shy smile. Then, the veteran butler mentions that the lady of the house is finally wrapping up her duties. Ein's entire face beams at the mention of his mother, dashing off to see her before the feast begins. He straightens his clothes in the hallway, takes a breath, and politely knocks for permission to enter. Olivia welcomes her son with a gaze full of pure, radiant love. Even though she's his mother, he often thinks of her more like a protective older sister, given the maturity he kept from his previous life. She pulls him into a warm embrace, teasing that he still smells like old parchment and library dust. Blushing at the call-out, he gives a small grin and asks about the mountain of paperwork she's been tackling. Since she handles everything solo, the workload is insane, and she's exhausted just thinking about the finish line. This makes Ein realize his father isn't helping her at all. He's in awe of her prowess as a top-tier trading company director. To this mama's boy, she is the most stunning woman in the world. Olivia suddenly remembers she has a special surprise waiting for him. The moment he's been waiting for has finally arrived. He knows exactly what it is as they present him with an official status card detailing his raw stats and unique skills. Ein's eyes sparkle with excitement as he thanks her, but his heart sinks when he sees his base numbers. Look, while pretty underwhelming, Olivia quickly reassures him, explaining those are incredible stats for a child. He finally lets out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Plus, he's gained a training skill that grants high resistance to sickness and physical exhaustion. It's a growth skill born from his insane work ethic, proof of his daily grind. She then suggests a stroll, once she finishes a trivial errand for his grandmother. Apparently, the old matriarch wants her to pick out some tea. Olivia says it's a test of quality, but Ein knows the truth. It's a deliberate snub, treating a noble lady like a common servant. The reality of their family dynamic stings. He blames his useless skill for not being a strong enough heir to protect his mother from this disrespect. Sensing his dark mood, she gently takes his hand and asks if he'll be her knight on this errand. His mood flips instantly. He's all in. Later, a merchant sitting in an empty room leaps to his feet the moment Olivia enters the room. He wasted no time laying out a spread of premium teas for her review. While they talk shop, Ein's eyes caught a glimmer of light from the merchant's crate. Magic stones. His curiosity was piqued instantly. These mana crystals are rare gems harvested from the hearts of magical beasts. High-tier stones are dangerous, radiating mana that can actually warp the human body. Luckily, the merchant had a low-grade scrap that was safe enough for a child to hold. While the adults haggled, he stared at the golden crystal in his palm. It smelled sweet, rich, and intoxicating, like concentrated honey. The scent was so powerful, he could practically taste the sweetness on his tongue. He tried to snap out of it. No sane person in the history of this world had ever tried to eat a magic stone. But the aroma was a siren's song, and it was simply too tempting to resist. The adults were distracted, so he took a risk and licked the stone. One touch was all it took. His eyes nearly popped out his head. It was pure, sugary bliss. When asked if he was okay, he played it cool, guiltily asking if he could keep the rock. The merchant, seeing a chance to butter up a noble, gave it to him as a freebie. With the tea deal closed in 3 exclusive blends selected, Olivia led her son toward the lush gardens for their walk. But as he stood up to follow her, he realized the crystal in his hand had completely translucent and smooth. The following day, Ein was out in the field, grinding through his sword drills as always. Despite the fatigue, a strange, overwhelming surge of power bubbled within him. His eyes locked onto that reinforced training dummy, and a wild idea started to brew. Spotting him again, the guard barked the same warning as before. But this time, the boy didn't hesitate. He charged, his grip tightening around the hilt. Gritting his teeth, he unleashed a heavy horizontal slash, and for once he didn't budge an inch. The impact was explosive, kicking up a massive cloud of dust across the training grounds. He started to celebrate, thrilled that he wasn't sent tumbling backward like a rag doll, until he looked down and realized his wooden practice sword had shattered into splinters. But the real shocker came when he turned to the dummy and watched the heavy metal collapse. His strike had sliced it clean in half, carving through solid steel and the reinforced wood beneath. The guard stood frozen in disbelief, and so did Ein. Only a few, guessed that his stats had reached a terrifying new peak overnight. Soon after, their carriage rattled through the city streets. Inside, Olivia was visibly fuming, her cheeks puffed out in a pout. I tried to calm her down, but she was far past the point of reason. There was a damn good reason why the usually gentle and elegant mother was this tilted. A high society gala was underway, and Logos planned to officially name Grint as the family heir. Worse, he intended to announce the 4-year-old's engagement to the noble Lady Shannon. Olivia's voice softened as she apologized to Ein, knowing the sting of his father's blatant favoritism. He felt a pang of loneliness, sure, but his heart broke more for his mother, who was constantly treated like an outcast because of his mediocre talent. As he racked his brain for a way to prove his worth to the world, the sensation of cutting through that steel dummy flashed back into his mind. The adults brushed it off as mental fatigue or a lucky break. But he knew the truth. Everything changed the second he licked that magic stone. Suddenly, the carriage came to a halt, and they stepped out into the crisp air. Ein's jaw nearly hit the floor at the sight of the massive estate before them. It was a sprawling masterpiece of architecture, far outclassing their own home, truly a residence befitting a Grand Duke. Without a word of comfort, Logos ordered the two of them to wait in the foyer while he and Grint went to suck up to Shannon's family. The boy's blood boiled as his step-family flashed him a mocking, "You don't belong here" smirk, but Olivia simply turned her back on them with ice-cold dignity and led her son away. Just then, Cammy called out to Logos, telling him the master of the house was ready. Then came the ultimate slap in the face. They were told that Ein wasn't even allowed to set foot in the party. The rule stated only one child per family could attend, and Grint had already taken the slot. Olivia fought for an exception, claiming a clerical error, but the staff wouldn't budge. It had the foul stench of a scheme by Cammy, who wanted zero distractions during her son's big debut. The receptionist, sweating bullets between the two powers, apologized profusely to the fuming mother. Ein, who didn't give a damn about a stuffy party anyway, played it off like a pro and pointed outside, shouting about how gorgeous the gardens looked and how much he'd rather take a walk there. The guard, relieved to avoid a noble meltdown, rushed to get permission from the Duke himself. Olivia looked at her son, her eyes searching his, asking if he was truly okay being left out. He gave her a warm look, saying that a stuffy room full of nobles couldn't compare to a peaceful walk in a magnificent garden with his mother, who was more beautiful than any flower there. Overwhelmed by his sweetness, she pulled him into a crushing hug. The receptionist returned out of breath, announcing that not only was permission granted, but the Duke had ordered a personal guide to show them the private grounds. As the mother and son looked on in confusion, a radiant young girl stepped forward with a graceful bow. This was the one everyone talked about, Krone, the granddaughter of the legendary head of the August family. Ein felt his face heat up the moment he saw her. He managed to stay polite despite his nerves, returning the greeting while wondering why someone as high-ranking as the Duke's granddaughter would bother with them. Krone locked eyes with him for a long, silent moment, before blinking and apologizing for the unfortunate mistake at the gate. As a gesture of goodwill, she offered to be their personal guide through the family's most prized floral sanctuary. And so, the three of them strolled through the breathtaking courtyard as the sky began to bleed into twilight. While the ladies engaged in elegant small talk, Ein's attention was completely snagged by a cluster of mysterious, glowing blue flowers. Krone noticed his gaze and mentioned that dusk is when the garden truly reveals its magic. She watched the pair from the corner of her eye, noting the genuine bond between mother and son. Back at the party, she had heard nothing but toxic gossip about Ein being a lazy, talentless brat. The rumors claimed that with Grint as the heir, the kingdom's future was finally safe. Now she realized those rumors were absolute trash, as the boy before her was a total gentleman. Suddenly, caught her off guard by walking right up to her and calling her beautiful. But with the child's innocent timing, he immediately shifted the compliment to the glowing roses. Blushing slightly, she explained that it was a blue fire rose, a flower that creates its own light. They are notoriously temperamental, making them nearly impossible to cultivate. She added a chilling warning. Despite their celestial beauty, one must never touch them, as a single rose packs enough toxin to drop 1,000 grown men. The poison burns the victim from the inside out, hence the name Fire Rose. Olivia added that these flowers have a hidden, legendary form. They can transform into the ultimate jewel. Due to their unique crystalline properties, they activate only when the lethal poison is completely purged. The result is a star crystal, a gem that flickers with the intensity of a sun in the night sky. They're the pinnacle of rarity, with only 2 known to exist in the entire Kingdom of Heim. The extraction process is a nightmare, requiring alchemical medicines that cost as much as a whole territory's annual revenue. That's when it clicked for Ein. He remembered the goddess's promise. His ability could decompose any poison or bacteria. With the image of his father's cold shoulder burning in his mind, he steeled his nerves, prepared for any pain as long as he stayed conscious. He asked Krone if she'd like to see a real star crystal, and she admitted it had been her lifelong dream. Believing his power was meant for this exact moment, he reached out his hand toward the deadly, glowing bloom. The women screamed for him to stop, but they were a second too slow. He had already plucked the flower by its jagged, thorny stem. Instantly, the mana and toxins began to evaporate into the air. A sensation like a plunge into icy water hit him. It felt like the sharp tingle of a carbonated drink mixed with a blast of mint. Strangely, the agonizing headache and fatigue from his previous test never came. Krone scrambled to pull him back, but Olivia stood frozen in pure awe, realizing her son was attempting the impossible. Ein pressed on, his focus sharpening. He knew he could do this. Just as the goddess had said, when it comes to poison, he is the undisputed king. The flower in his hand erupted in a pillar of light, forcing the ladies to shield their eyes from the blinding radiance. When the light faded, their jaws dropped. The fire rose had been replaced by a shimmering, perfect star crystal. Krone's mind went blank as she stared at the young boy, holding a national treasure as if it were a common pebble. Apologizing for the shock, he dropped to one knee, explaining it was a secret facet of his unique skill. He told her he wanted to give her the one thing she had always wished for, and held out the glowing gem, asking her if she would accept his gift. Olivia stood there like a statue, her eyes wide in her mouth hanging open as her son made his move. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but silence, and Ein started to panic, wondering if he'd been a bit too manhwa protagonist for a first meeting. Terrified that she might laugh him off, he cautiously peeks at her, only to find the girl's face as red as a ripe tomato. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, completely blindsided by his bold gesture, yet she still managed to whisper a question, asking if he was truly surrendering such a legendary treasure to her. Flashing a dazzling, confident grin, he quipped that it would actually be a huge disaster if she turned him down. Trying to settle her racing pulse, she slowly reached out her trembling hand to claim the radiant gem. As it shimmered intensely under the moon's silver glow, she accepted with a shy smile. Thrilled, he asked for permission to craft another for his mother. In a heartbeat, he repeated the miracle for Olivia, handing her a priceless artifact without a single moment of hesitation. Later, as they drifted back toward the Grand Hall, Krone bid them farewell, needing to resume her duties as the evening's hostess. Ein offered a stiff, formal bow of gratitude for her hospitality, but she suddenly puffed out her cheeks and scolded him, warning him that formal talk was strictly banned between them from now on. Letting out a genuine laugh, he switched to a casual tone, and a warm, unspoken bond formed between the 2 young prodigies. After parting ways, the mother and son were left to wait for the rest of their household. But even as the last of the guests trickled out, Logos was nowhere to be found. Olivia finally approached a passing maid, her voice laced with concern, asking if anyone had seen her husband. The answer was a slap in the face. The general had moved on to organize a private banquet, and had ditched the venue hours ago without so much as a goodbye to his own wife and child. The sheer coldness of the act was a line in the sand. This time, it couldn't be swept under the rug. Despite his adult-like composure, Ein's expression crumbled into a sad frown, wondering if his father truly saw him as nothing but trash. As he let out a heavy sigh, Olivia, hearing the raw honesty in his voice for the first time, reached a breaking point. She knelt before her son and asked point-blank, "Do you actually like your father?" He admitted that while he felt some gratitude, he had grown to despise the man for the way he treated her. She took his feelings in silence before a radiant, determined smile broke across her face, praising him for his courage. As his mother, she refused to let him suffer in this toxic household for another second. She grabbed his hand with newfound strength and began pulling him toward the exit. They were leaving for a place more beautiful than any garden, her true, hidden homeland. Ein was stunned. He had never heard a word about another home. To prove she was serious, Olivia slipped the engagement ring off her finger, and the band simply dissolved into shimmering dust at her fingertips. The boy's eyes widened in shock as he asked what she was doing, but she simply told him that they were officially done with that part of their lives. She swept back her hair to reveal a hidden golden earring that pulsed with light as she summoned a specialized carriage to take her home. With zero explanations, she ushered her son toward the port city. Their escape back to the mansion was a blur, sliding through the gates just before the clock struck midnight. Confused, the boy noticed they didn't stop. The carriage kept charging ahead. Olivia just winked and said they were going a little bit further. He had no choice but to trust her, and moments later, he pressed his face against the window, hearing a massive commotion echoing through the late-night city streets. Outside, the citizens were in a frenzy, screaming for the knights to assemble. Ein's heart plummeted into his stomach when he saw the reason. A colossal warship was breaching the kingdom's harbor. While he turned pale with dread, Olivia stepped down from the carriage with a calm, regal air and beckoned him to follow. Seeing the famous noblewoman, the panicked crowd stopped to ask what kind of invasion was happening. A massive ramp lowered, and a sea of elite soldiers began to march out in perfect formation. The townspeople lost it, fearing a massacre was about to begin. But the army stopped dead in its tracks right in front of Olivia. Ein instinctively jumped in front of his mother to shield her, until she gently told him to stand down. The soldiers split like the Red Sea, and a striking female captain stepped forward, telling the brave little knight to relax. With golden hair and polished armor, she knelt before him, introducing herself as Tina and declaring it a supreme honor to meet him. He realized she wasn't an enemy and couldn't help but be slightly dazed by her sharp, impressive beauty. She mentioned it had been ages and confessed she pushed the engines to the limit the moment Olivia's signal reached her. After all, this legendary warship was christened the Princess Olivia. The name hit like a thunderclap. Stunned, the onlookers whispered about what that could possibly imply. But his mother promised to spill all the secrets once they were underway. Together, they ascended the ramp. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Duke's estate, Duke Graf was being briefed on the boy's incredible composure earlier that evening. Krone vouched for the hidden, remarkable genius of the eldest. Ondatson. She even showed him the impossible star crystal the boy had gifted her. The Duke went silent, contemplating the weight of that gift. Knowing the Roundhearts pushed the second son forward while hiding Ein, he worried they were about to trigger a massive diplomatic disaster. To Krone's confusion, he lowered his voice to share a secret meant only for family ears. Once he was sure they were alone, he spoke of a hidden superpower across the ocean. Just 4 days from their port lies the Empire of Estal. It is a unified titan of culture, technology, and sheer military dominance. A nation Heim could never hope to challenge. Krone wondered what that had to do with Ein, and the Duke revealed the truth. Olivia wasn't just some merchant's daughter. The current king of Estal is King Silva, and the woman standing next to Ein is his daughter, the second princess of the empire. In other words, Ein's mother is literal imperial royalty. Out on the open sea, Olivia apologized to her son for the years of secrecy. He asked why a princess would ever settle for the Roundheart house, but before she could answer, Tina gave a sharp look to stop her. The mother laughed, clinging to Ein and teasing the captain about her scary guard face. With a soft smile, Olivia promised to explain the full story when the time was right. Ein smiled back, realizing this was the first time he'd seen his mother look truly free and happy. Seeing how much she had suffered back in Heim, he much preferred this playful side of her. Changing gears, they talked about the star crystal he had given her. It was no surprise she was protecting it like her life depended on it. After all, in Estal, gifting a star crystal is the equivalent of a formal marriage proposal. The boy nearly choked on his own breath, sweating buckets of pure panic. He looked from a knight to his mother, who was just watching him with a mischievous, knowing smirk. The realization hit him like a truck. Krone had accepted his crystal. He let out a scream of absolute disbelief. He hadn't intended to propose, but looking back at who he gave it to, he figured things could be worse. Ignoring his mental breakdown, Tina announced they would reach the capital before the midday sun. They would be switching to a water train, a marvel of engineering powered by magic stone-heated boilers. Connecting the dots, Ein casually theorized about steam propulsion and the massive technological chasm between Esthal and the primitive Heim. Both ladies stared at him, their faces lighting up at his unexpected brilliance. While they marveled at his intellect, he quickly pivoted, claiming he just read it in some dusty book. Terrified, he'd almost exposed his past life knowledge. Since the journey was still long, Tina advised them to catch some sleep while they could. Mother and son spent the following days in luxury, and Ein was even fitted for a sharp new wardrobe fit for an Imperial prince. Soon, they arrived at the water train station, leaving the young man completely starstruck. Beyond the mind-blowing technology, the streets were packed with diverse races. Elves and beastmen mingling with humans as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His eyes sparkled with wonder. He hadn't stopped grinning since they touched down in the kingdom. Esthal was a true, multi-ethnic utopia. Tina, looking a bit drained from the trip, finally pushed open a grand door, announcing their arrival. It was spectacular. The entire horizon was filled with the kind of majestic, imposing architecture he had only seen in dreams. Standing at the threshold, the vice-captain of the Royal Guard snapped a salute and announced their entrance. As the door swung wide, Ein was awestruck by Tina's charisma, but Olivia whispered that she was actually a total klutz. Proving the point instantly, Tina tried to step aside with a flourish to let them pass, but stumbled over her own feet, barely catching herself before eating the floor. Mother and son shared a quiet, genuine laugh as they stepped into their new life. As they navigate the grand palace corridors, the princess asks if the king has been briefed on their sudden arrival. Tina sighs, explaining that everything happened so fast she hadn't managed to send word to anyone. In fact, she had to order the palace staff to play dumb and act as if they hadn't seen Olivia until the reunion. The order came from Martha, who didn't want the king's heart rate spiking too early. Ein imagines an imposing, charismatic matron, but his daydream is cut short as they reach the heavy doors of the royal council chamber. Normal people wouldn't dare interrupt a high-level summit, but Olivia doesn't care. She kicks the doors open and announces her return to a room full of the nation's elite. Her father's jaw drops as he stands up instantly. Ein, on the other hand, finds himself struggling to even draw a breath, completely paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming aura of the king of Esthal. As the ruler of a global superpower, the king's mere presence is enough to turn the entire room into a freezer. While Ein stands there gulping in pure intimidation, King Silva demands to know why his married daughter is back home. Then he spots the boy. "And who is this brat?" he asks. Ein's voice dies in his throat, from a massive wave of stage fright. Fortunately, a gentle hand on his back, and his mother's warm smile give him the boost he needs. Taking a deep breath, he offers a perfect greeting, introducing himself as a former member of the Roundheart household. Finally, connecting the dots, Silva softens. He kneels to meet the boy's gaze, introducing himself not as a king, but as his grandfather. The terrifying aura vanishes, replaced by a look of pure affection. But just as the ice melts, another giant of a man steps forward, kneeling with such force the floor vibrates. It's Joyd, the Grand Marshal, the man who lives and breathes for the defense of Esthal. The boy shakes the hand of the mountain-like man, officially placing himself under his wing. Silva then laughs, certain that Ein's comment about being a former Roundheart is just a witty joke. He waits for the punchline, but it never comes. Instead, Olivia drops a bombshell. She has officially dissolved the marriage, and she is never, ever going back. The room goes deathly silent. Thinking he's trapped in a nightmare, the king actually asks the marshal to punch him in the face to wake him up. When he realizes he's wide awake, he demands a full report from his daughter. Her answer is simple and heartbreaking. Neither she nor her son could find a single shred of happiness in that place. Stunned by the weight of her words, the king cancels the meeting and swears everyone to absolute secrecy. He orders Tina to fetch Warren and Katie immediately. Olivia is going to testify before the inner court. The hours tick by as the princess recounts the hell she endured in Heim. Veins pulse on Silva's forehead as his killing intent begins to leak into the room. He barks at Joyd to ready the troops, and the equally enraged Marshal vows to bring Heim to its knees. Luckily, Olivia is the voice of reason, reminding them that a non-aggression pact is still in place. Katie, the first princess, scoffs, noting that disinheriting a child over a useless skill is beyond pathetic. Ein just stares at her, his brain short-circuiting because she's a talking cat. With the marriage pact effectively shredded, the princess is finally allowed to tell Ein the truth about his heritage. Warren, the prime minister, steps in to explain. Olivia's marriage was a strategic move to secure sea crystals, a vital resource Heim hoards. These are the crystallized remains of prehistoric monsters. The literal batteries for all Magitech technology. Ein nods. Back in Heim, these things were treated like common rocks. The problem is that Estel's own crystal mines have been bled dry, since every citizen in this advanced nation relies on Magitech. For their daily lives, a stable supply wasn't just a want. It was a survival necessity. The princess sacrificed her freedom, marrying into a backwater family just to keep Estel's lights on. In exchange for protection, the plan was for Ein to become a duke one day, keeping them both safe from the looming threat of the sea dragon. This piqued the boys' interest, but Joyd interrupted, suggesting they launch an immediate search for a new crystal source. Olivia just smiles and tells them to relax. She's already solved the energy crisis through years of secret, backbreaking labor. She asks Ein if he remembers her late nights at the office, and the realization finally hits him like a freight train. She had been running a global shadow operation, hiring merchants and scouts to find a new source, and she succeeded. She lays out a mountain of evidence. Warren scans the maps and looks baffled. The location she's pointing to has been scouted a dozen times already. That's when she drops the twist. She's discovered land-based sea crystals. By hiding her identity and running a shell company, she outplayed every scout in the world. The council is left speechless by the sheer brilliance of the second princess's achievement. Ein is the only one who truly knows how much blood, sweat, and tears she poured into this mission. Despite the pressure, she played the role of the perfect countess and earned the genuine love of the common people. Even after Grint was born and the household turned against her, she never let the mask slip. She always made time to be a mother to Ein, no matter how heavy her burden was. He feels a pang of guilt, believing he was nothing but a weight around her neck. Silva, visibly moved, apologizes for forcing such a cruel burden on his own daughter. She just pulls Ein close, telling the king that the boy is her entire world. For the person who gave her true happiness, no mission was too hard. Her words wash away his insecurities, and the council smiles, seeing the warrior princess she has become. Ready to make things right, the king calls for Warren, who produces a set of official documents with the inhuman speed of a legendary bureaucrat. The queen has already given her blessing and her royal seal. Now, there was only one step left. Every member of the council signs the decree without a moment's hesitation, with Joyd and Warren acting as the final witnesses. The sudden shift to high-stakes formality confuses Ein, but the real shock comes when the king addresses him directly, in his capacity as the sovereign ruler. Silva declares that Ein is now officially recognized as a member of the royal house of Estel. To anyone else, it would sound like a fever dream. Born as the useless eldest son of a minor count in a tiny kingdom, his hard work ignored and his potential mocked, tossed aside like garbage in favor of his younger brother. But in a single night, the ruler of the world's most powerful empire has named Ein the crown prince of an unrivaled superpower. The news hit the capital of Estel like a hurricane. Rumors of Olivia's divorce and her triumphant return were on everyone's lips, along with dark whispers about what kind of idiot Heim must be to let her go. Naturally, everyone was dying to know about the new crown prince and the secret power he must hold. At that moment, Ein was busy getting schooled by Joyd in the training hall. The marshal dismantled his defense easily, but praised his form. It was clear that Ein's dedication to the sword was on a whole different level from his peers. The praise felt good, but Ein's mind was still stuck on his brother, convinced that a natural genius like Grint was probably already surpassing him. As someone desperate for validation, he had worked himself to the bone only to be exiled without a single win, leaving him wondering if the people of Estel would ever see him as anything more than a petty hire. He lamented that things would be different if he had an S-rank combat skill. Hearing this, Joyd noticed a small rip in the boy's shirt. He walked over calmly and, to Ein's total shock, pulled out a sewing kit he apparently keeps, hidden in his armor at all times. The boy stared in confusion as the legendary general threaded a needle with surgical precision and began to mend the fabric. With god-tier dexterity, the hole vanished in the blink of an eye. The repair was so perfect you'd need a microscope to find it. The Marshal's innate skill is tailoring, a power that has absolutely zero to do with leading armies or slaying dragons. Most high-ranking officials would be embarrassed, but Joyd reached the top through raw, unadulterated effort. He explained that no matter how high your skill level, you can't perform at your peak without a body tempered by discipline. Gripping Ein's shoulders, he told him that effort is the master key that unlocks every door. If he keeps grinding with the same fire he's shown so far, his doubts will eventually turn into certainties. Ein is deeply moved by the wisdom, but the bromance is cut short by a persistent, demanding meow. Katie pounces on him, complaining that she's been hunting him down all morning. Without waiting for an answer, she drags him away, borrowing the prince for urgent business. They end up in a chaotic laboratory overflowing with ancient tomes and blueprints. Ein asks why she needed him, and she reveals she's been tasked with verifying Olivia's claims about his unusual physiology. Tina pops her head in, giggling at the sight of the boy being bullied by the tiny princess. Fortunately, Ein finds it surprisingly easy to communicate with a talking cat. He hands over his status card, and Katie's eyes nearly pop out of her head. She mutters that his stats are way too high for anyone to justify calling him useless. The numbers have surged since the last time he checked, and there's a brand new absorption skill listed at the bottom. It's the ultimate proof of his bloodline, a trait. That's the racial trait of a dryad, plain and simple. Ein just blinks, his brain short-circuiting for a second, as he realizes he was completely clueless about his own mother's bloodline. Turns out, the Estau royals have been mixing it up with different species for ages. It's basically a gotcha game, to see which race the kids inherit at birth. Back to business, they pivot to his stats, which are skyrocketing way faster than normal training allows. Katie's already cracked the case on why he's leveling up like a cheat code. It's highly likely he's been absorbing mana directly from magic stones. Monsters do it all the time by devouring stones, but humans usually die from the toxic overflow. It's just a theory for now, but she bets his decomposition skill is the secret filter making it possible. When they ask if he's ever sampled a stone, a memory flashes back. The time he accidentally licked a sweet-smelling magic stone during a deal in Heim. But wait, that was a cheap scrap. How did it buff his stats so much? Tina steps up to drop a bombshell. He didn't just drain the stone. He absorbed mana from her too. He panics, pointing out she doesn't exactly have a stone in her pocket. Wrong. Elves and demi-humans carry magic stones inside their bodies. The news hits him like a truck, meaning he's got one too. Tina explains that during their carriage ride, she felt weirdly drained, her legs turning to jelly for no reason. Ein remembers her nearly face-planting at the gate. Suddenly terrified, he asks if draining a person's stone is a death sentence. Relax, she's not going anywhere, unless he literally sucks the energy dry until there's nothing left. The lecture is over. It's time for a live field test. Katie hauls out a couple of crates overflowing with various magic stones and tells him to go wild. The pebbles are pocket change, but the big ones? Those are worth a king's ransom. He starts small, picking up a minor crystal. A few moments later, he tosses the drained, hollow husk back into the pile. The princess is visibly sweating at how effortlessly he's vacuuming up the power, while Tina points out that the cheap stones have been bleached completely colorless. Next up, the high-tier stuff. As he brings a premium gem to his lips, he can't help but wonder about the flavor profile. The girls scream and rush over when he suddenly starts gagging and clutching his throat. False alarm. The kid just hates the fact that the expensive ones taste like stale nuts. With the test complete, Katie's verdict is in. Ein can absorb power unconditionally, without any visible limit. Her eyes sparkle with a mix of excitement and dread as she explains the catch. Essentially, his raw stats might hit a ceiling regardless of how much mana he consumes. Even with a cap, he's already reached the level of a living, breathing superhuman. Suddenly, a new skill pops up on his status, likely a gift from one of those high-grade stones. It's weird, because he feels like he's at 100 capacity and peak condition, a far cry from the time he passed out after just cleaning some basement mold. That's the fruits of training skill at work, granting him a massive buff to his stamina and fatigue resistance. A voice echoes from the hall just as Olivia sweeps into the room. She smothers her son in a world-class hug. leaving Katie and Tina smiling awkwardly at the intense mother-son bond. The first princess announces that Ein's results are off the charts. Olivia's face lights up with relief, and she immediately whisks him away to see his grandfather. After a quick greeting, Silva leads them toward a set of massive, imposing royal doors. This is the threshold of the castle treasury, the most secure spot in the realm. The king reaches out and places his palm on one of the glowing red orbs embedded in the frame. The heavy doors groan open, revealing a hoard of legendary treasures. Ein is dazed, asking why on earth they've brought him to the inner sanctum. Silva reveals the truth. Olivia has a very special welcome home gift for him. The boy is stunned. This is a bit much for a homecoming present, isn't it? The king's gaze drifts toward a singular, magnificent artifact resting on a pedestal. He tells his grandson that this is the crown jewel of Estal, the magic stone of Dullahan. Legend says that 5 centuries ago, a demon lord nearly erased the continent, and Dullahan was his most terrifying general. A single swing of his blade could shatter the sky and part the sea. They say he was a black knight of unfathomable power. Hearing the lore, Ein can't believe they're handing a literal weapon of mass destruction to a kid. With a tender smile, Olivia assures him he's the only one worthy of the stone used by the king who first unified their world. Ein's heart hammers against his ribs. Wait, this story sounds eerily familiar. Silva gives his daughter one last look, making sure she really wants to hand over the national treasure. Olivia doesn't blink, and the king finally yields. Ein slowly steps toward the pulsating magic stone. Silva barks a warning for Olivia to stay back, shielding her with his own body. The raw mana radiating from the stone is enough to crush a normal person. As Ein closes the gap, the swirling, toxic mana begins to lash out and react violently, a sight that leaves the king and Olivia absolutely breathless with shock. The prince gulps, his nerves on fire, and slowly reaches out to touch the stone. In an instant, the poisonous aura surrounding the artifact erupts into a violent, localized hurricane around him. Olivia screams in terror for her son's life, but the king holds her back, keeping her in the safety zone. Inside the storm, Ein feels a tidal wave of raw, primitive power crashing into him. The mana spirals out of control, threatening to tear the room apart. The pressure is so intense, it nearly blasts the 2 spectators right out the door. Silva roars at him to let go immediately if he feels his body breaking. But Ein grips the stone tighter, his decomposition working overtime as the toxic mana floods his veins. The light flares to a blinding white before abruptly vanishing. As the dust settles, Silva and Olivia wait with bated breath. The air literally crackles with the weight of the power he just inhaled. Ein is practically vibrating with energy, and the look of sheer amazement on Silva and Olivia's faces says it all. Meanwhile, over at the Archduke's estate, Krone is lost in thought, staring out at the moon as it ducks behind a shroud of dark clouds. Clutching the blue gem against her heart, her mind drifts back to Ein, hoping fate brings them together again. Back in her room, she can't stop staring at the crystal, seeing his smile reflected in its facets. The silence of the room feels heavy and lonely after their short time together. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door breaks her trance. Her maid enters, checking in on the status of her grueling study assignments. Krone just gestures to the finished stack on her desk. The maid's jaw drops. Krone finished a week's worth of high-level work in just 2 days. She flashes a confident smile, telling the maid to tell her father to make the next batch harder. The maid nods, rushing to the door to deliver the completed work to the Archduke. Left alone again, Krone vows to push herself even harder. She wants to be a woman worthy of standing by Ein's side when they meet again. But before the maid leaves, she remembers a final message. The Duke wants a word. Exhausted, Krone flops onto her bed, planning to add horseback riding and combat lessons to her already insane schedule. Wait, that wasn't it. The Duke actually suggested she write a letter to Ein. Krone's brain stalls, and she immediately hits the panic button. She shrieks at the maid, demanding to know why she didn't lead with the most important news first. Forget the lessons. This is a crisis. She frantically scrambles for a pen and her best stationery. Then she freezes. What do you even say to a guy? The maid starts giggling, which only makes Krone's face turn a deeper shade of red. The maid apologizes, admitting she's never seen the Ice Princess lose her cool like this. She suggests asking the Duke for some diplomatic advice. Krone doesn't wait. She bolts for her father's study, ignoring the maid's pleas to slow down. Her heart is racing with pure affection. She's desperate to bridge the distance with a single letter. She can't help but wonder, is he thinking about her right now, too? Back in Estal, the king and princess are still reeling from the spectacle they just witnessed. The boy just devoured a national treasure like it was a light snack. Silva reminds him that raw power is a double-edged sword. Without control, it's just a liability. Then he looks over at his daughter, realizing this was her endgame all along. She knew her son was a man of vacuum and kept that nuclear option hidden until the right moment. Olivia's expression turns somber as she confesses the truth. She really did intend to live out her life in Heim as a loyal royal, trusting in the previous head of House Roundheart. But she always had a gut feeling that things with logos would go south, which is exactly why Ein was born as a dryad. The king is floored by the revelation. Olivia admits she knew years ago that her marriage was a ticking time bomb. Ein just stands there, completely lost in the high-level family drama and political secrets being dropped. The king clears his throat and tells Ein to head to his room. The adults have some serious talking to do. Still drowning in questions, he respects the king's wish and leaves the two of them to discuss things in private. Later, he finds himself enjoying afternoon tea with the unlikely duo of Warren and Katie. The first princess sighs, lamenting her failure to shield Olivia from that disastrous marriage, yet marveling that a dryad has finally reappeared in the royal bloodline. Ever the curious soul, Ein asks for a definition of Isher hazes, as the princess is always so blunt. Katie explains, with zero filter, that it's the process of making babies, nearly causing Warren to choke on his tea. The old man snaps at her to show some restraint. Ignoring his lecture, she explains that for dryads, the act is sacred. They only mate once in their entire lives. They choose a single partner to bind their life force with forever. Skeptical, Ein looks to Warren, who solemnly confirms the legend is true. As Ein processes this, he realizes something huge. Katie, reading his mind as usual, adds that dryads can actually reproduce without a partner at all. With this, she confirms the bombshell. Ein is the sole descendant of Olivia, essentially a genetic carbon copy of his mother. Warren sighs, realizing Olivia couldn't bear to be with Logos, yet her royal duty demanded she produce a viable heir. It was a heavy sacrifice. She likely used her innate hypnosis to trick Logos into believing Ein was truly his flesh and blood. Warren looks at the boy and asks him not to hold the deception against his mother. Ein just smiles, relieved to know he shares no blood with a man like Logos. While the world might gossip, Warren points out a powerful truth. Olivia fulfilled her royal obligation by bringing Ein into the world, so no one has the right to judge her path. Feeling a weight lift off his chest, Ein's stomach suddenly growls. Katie notes that he's surprisingly tough for a kid who just had his world turned upside down. She's impressed by his resilience despite all the family drama. However, she warns him to stay far away from the audience hall for now. Confused, he asks what's so dangerous about the throne room. Warren reveals it houses a second national treasure, the Demon King's magic stone. If Ein's hunger peaks, he might accidentally vacuum up the stone's mana, which would be a diplomatic disaster. Ein is stunned. That stone belonged to the very enemy the first king slew. Katie notes that the room's intense aura is why Tina nearly fainted earlier. It's no place for a hungry mana absorber. Fascinated by the founding hero, Ein grills Warren for more details. The Prime Minister gladly shares tales of the man whose strength and heart were legendary. In awe of the hero's greatness, Ein asks if his fame reached as far as Heim. Warren reassures him that the first king's legacy is eternal and admired across every border. A somber thought strikes Ein. Everything he has, his title, his safety, was won by his mother's sweat. He feels like a royal freeloader. In that moment, he vows to make Heim regret their arrogance and show the Roundhearts exactly what they threw away. It's a bold claim, but he declares he will become a legend worthy of the first king's name. He will lead with a lion's heart and unmatched power, carving his name into history. Witnessing this fire, Warren drops to one knee and swears his absolute fealty to the young prince. He assigns Joyd and Tina to sharpen the boy's blade, while he personally takes charge of Ein's academic hell week starting tonight. Suddenly, Katie tackles him, declaring she's claiming him as her personal research subject. She drags him toward her lab, itching to dissect the secrets of his Dullahan power. As he's hauled down the hall, Warren watches him go, seeing the ghost of the first king's greatness reflected in the boy. Time skips ahead, and while the commoners go about their peaceful lives, Ein is deep in the wilderness, getting a taste of the real world. Joyd explains that training now means surviving against actual monsters. Unlike his sparring partners, these rabid beasts play for keeps. Ein tightens his grip, knowing the stakes. Right on cue, a grotesque, oversized forest rat scurries out of the brush. Tina steps up to give him a tactical breakdown, but the prince waves her off, drawing his blade and stepping forward to face the vermin alone. The two knights watch with bated breath as he locks onto the enemy's rhythm. He notes the venomous-looking fangs and sharp claws, knowing one mistake could be fatal. The beast screeches and lunges. The sound of the struggle echoes through the trees, but Ein's training holds true. He carves through the first rat and pivots instantly as a second beast leaps from the shadows. After the dust settles, Joyd praises his efficiency. Tina beams with pride, noting that Ein's swordsmanship is already outclassing his age. Suddenly, a massive slime surges behind him. Tina reaches for her hilt, but Ein reacts first, deflecting the blow with shadowy tentacles erupting from his back. The knights stand frozen in shock, witnessing the true terror of the Dullahan ability, the Phantom Hand. It's a dark art he perfected over 8 grueling months of training. The limb size and strength scale with the mana, he feeds them. He even utilizes a mod Katie designed to skewer live prey and siphon their life force directly. A movie calls the dark straw. Tina shudders, calling it yet another dangerously efficient invention from the first princess. Ein casually notes that siphoning live energy tastes way better than eating dried claws, adding it to his feedback notes for Katie. The knights offer a forced laugh, clearly a bit unsettled by his appetite for monster mana. Later, they're back in the royal carriage, heading for the castle. Glancing out the window, Ein spots a high-end magic stone boutique. Tina explains it's the most prestigious shop in the city, even supplying the palace itself. Seeing the sparkle in the prince's eyes, Joyd suggests a quick shopping spree. After ducking into a quiet alley, Tina helps Ein don a disguise. Since his royal debut hasn't happened yet, he needs to remain incognito. Joyd stays back to avoid drawing crowds. Inside, they're greeted by a man so flashy he could be a disco ball. Ein is momentarily stunned. He whispers to Tina that he's here for stones, not a fashion show. Tina giggles, explaining the owner is eccentric but brilliant, so there's no need to panic. Maggie, the shop owner, sashays over to greet her new customers. Tina offers a polite, awkward smile as Maggie recognizes the elite knight instantly. Maggie's gaze shifts to Ein, correctly guessing he's the VIP Tina is escorting. Exhaling a cloud from her pipe, Maggie asks what the little gentleman is looking for. Ein's answer, magic stones, clearly piques her interest. She's impressed by a kid with such refined taste. She decides she likes his style and gives them the run of the place. However, she warns them, do not touch the sea crystals on the pedestals, as the raw mana could cook a normal person's insides. Ein begins browsing the glittering displays. Luckily, he's mastered his absorption skill. Now, instead of the dizzying, overwhelming scent of sweets, he only picks up subtle aromas. Suddenly, he stops. He smells something mouth-watering, like a premium steak. He tracks the scent to a vibrant blue orb tucked in a corner. Maggie smirks, noting his sharp nose. That stone came from a white bison, a monster prize for its legendary marbled meat. The prince is sold instantly. He's never smelled a stone this delicious and drops 30,000 gold on it without blinking. Feeling a bit self-conscious, he whispers to Tina that his grandpa basically gave him a blank check for his outing. Seeing his joy, she gently reminds him to keep his special diet and his royal identity under wraps. Ein continues his shopping spree, sweeping up every stone that catches his eye. Tina can only sigh, wondering just how much allowance the king actually handed over. As Maggie rings up the mountain of crystals, Ein's excitement hits a fever pitch. He can't wait to get back to the castle and taste test his haul. Suddenly, a strange sensation prickles the back of his neck, and he turns around. His eyes lock onto a deep purple gem, and he finds himself unable to look away. Maggie warns him that it's a cursed stone, handing him his original purchases. Legend says the gem invades its owner's dreams, endlessly screaming its desire to escape. She didn't buy the ghost stories at first, but after hearing the singing herself, she sealed it inside a specialized containment box. Ayn stares at the gem, but senses no malice, only a mystery. He wonders if Katie could crack the curse, and decides to buy the stone. Containment box and all, Tina nearly has a heart attack, begging him to leave the dark artifact alone. Maggie gives him a piercing look, asking if the stone is already manipulating his mind, and assures her his head is clear. He just wants it. Maggie reveals that just the safety box alone costs another 30,000 gold. Ein pays the tab instantly, ignoring Tina's protests. Maggie hands it over with a final warning. If the thing starts acting up, bring it back immediately. Tina tries one last time to object, but she knows she's lost this battle. She puts her faith in Maggie's sealing prowess and hopes for the best. As Ein continues to browse the rest of the shop, Maggie lets out a long sigh, muttering that the prince is going to be a real handful. Tina freezes, her jaw dropping as she tries to play it off as a misunderstanding, but she's a terrible liar. Maggie chuckles, noting that Tina is so transparent she knew who the boy was the second they walked in. Tina begs her to keep it a secret. The shop owner promises her lips are sealed but tells the knight to work on her poker face. With tears of relief in her eyes, Tina thanks the eccentric owner. Having finished his high-stakes shopping trip, Ein leaves the shop with a satisfied grin. He turns his attention. After securing all his essential gear, Ein steps out of the shop with a satisfied smirk. He immediately shifts his focus toward his next objective. He turns toward his knight and catches a glimpse of her reddened eyes. Tina quickly brushes them dry, insisting it's nothing more than a bit of dust stinging her eyes. As night falls, Ein collapses on his bed, his body heavy with fatigue. The headmaid, Martha, glides into the room to help him change. Feeling a bit flustered, he insists he can handle his own clothes. She simply counters that as Olivia's right hand, it's only natural she looks after the prince as well. He opens his mouth to protest again, but her sharp, "Don't argue with me" smile shuts him up instantly. She then produces a sealed envelope, revealing that this particular piece of mail has traveled all the way from the port of Hilo, sent by a noble within Heim. Ever since Ein and Olivia's dramatic exit, Estelle has cut all diplomatic ties. Yet, this sender went through the trouble of smuggling a letter across borders. Martha smells a rat and suggests tossing the suspicious parchment into the fire immediately. He examines the seal for a heartbeat before tearing it open. His eyes widen as he scans the lines. It's a heartfelt message recounting the day they first met and how that brief encounter sparked a change deep within her. She pours out her thanks for the priceless gift he gave her, mentioning she carries it as her most cherished lucky charm. Though the signature is missing and doesn't need a name to know this is from Krone. The mystery girl playfully adds that she'll only reveal her identity if he sends an official invitation to the kingdom. The realization that their paths might cross again sends a surge of nervous energy through him. Ein traces the handwriting, still reeling from the fact that Krone actually reached out to him. Martha asks if he intends to pen a reply, and the prince nods firmly, knowing Olivia adores Krone, though he worries if a noble from Heim can even clear the border. Martha winks, assuring him that if she's a friend of Lady Olivia, no gate in the world will stay closed for long. That sets his mind at ease, praying Warren will bless the arrangement. He gazes at the radiant moon and finds his thoughts drifting back to Krone, his heart already racing at the prospect of their reunion. The next morning, Ein is back on the grind, crossing blades with the palace's elite knights. Olivia, Joyd, and Tina are all perched in the stands, watching his every move with bated breath. A seasoned knight lunges to sweep him off his feet, but Ein contorts his body with fluid grace to dodge the strike. In a flash of movement, Ein presses the tip of his wooden practice sword against the cornered knight's throat. The man yields, and the training ground erupts as Ein is declared the victor. He sprints toward his mother like a happy pup, and she tenderly cups his face, beaming with pride at his relentless work ethic. He turns to Joyd and Tina, bowing in gratitude for their constant guidance. Tina shakes her head, insisting it's his own fire that fueled this growth, her eyes glistening with tears of pure joy at how far he's come. She whispers that he has truly blossomed into a prince beyond compare. Meanwhile, Joyd is back in drill sergeant mode, barking at the defeated knights to run laps around the outer walls until the sun drops. Ein tries to intervene, claiming his victory was just a byproduct of his magic stone cheat code. But Joyd shuts that down. He explains that certain skills only awaken for those who bleed in the dirt. It was Ein's own grit that sharpened his toxin decomposition into a true weapon. The general then cracks his knuckles, telling the prince he's ready whenever Ein is. Confused, Ein asks ready for what? With a wolfish grin, Joyd replies for a real match. Against me. That sentence sends an arctic chill straight down Ein's spine. Shortly after, the entire city is jolted by a thunderous explosion echoing from the castle heights. As the smoke clears, Ein immediately taps out, having barely survived a devastating shockwave from Joyd's blade. The general is genuinely impressed the boy even dodged it, noting that his training has transformed him into a real contender. Tina rushes over with water, but Ein warns her to keep her distance. He's so drained he might accidentally inhale her internal magic stone. She jumps back in a panic. Joyd calls the session, declaring that with these skills, Ein is finally ready for the next big stage. Startled, the boy looks to his mother for clues. Olivia explains that since his 7th birthday is approaching, it's time to tackle the entrance exams for the Royal Academy. Soon, Ein is buried in books. She informs him that the academy, directed by his own grandfather, is in the heart of the capital. He'll be commuting via the high-speed water train. He lets out a heavy sigh, the pressure of being the crown prince student weighing on him. Suddenly, Tina pokes her head through the door with a playful smile, asking if he's up for a moonlit stroll. The two wander toward the hidden reaches of the castle grounds. Ein is floored to find a pristine, secret beach tucked away there. Tina explains it's an emergency escape route, not a vacation spot. With the exam looming tomorrow, she asks if he's ready for the practical swordsmanship test. She gives him a confident smirk, saying he's a shoo-in since he's been trained by the best in the business. Ein hopes she's right, wondering internally if Tina and Joyd could actually take down a monster like Logos. She goes quiet, the answer being far too complicated for a simple yes. Instead, she offers to show him a high-level trick. She holds her sword out over the sand and lets it go. Ein locks his gaze, intently on the falling weapon. His eyes follow the steel as it plummets toward the ground. But the moment it hits, his heart stops. Tina has vanished into thin air. A hand taps his shoulder, and he jumps out of his skin as she reappears right beside him. She explains she moved the millisecond the sword left her hand. She claims that at that speed, even Logos would be swinging at shadows, and Joyd would likely dominate the field. Seeing the true ceiling of their power, Ein vows to one day surpass them both and stand equal to the first king. He thanks Tina for the beach trip and for helping him clear his head. She blushes slightly, impressed as always by how quickly he reads her intentions. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind whips through, snapping the ribbon from Tina's hair and letting it cascade down her shoulders. The sight leaves him completely flustered. She flushes and scrambles to tie it back up, asking why he's suddenly acting like a statue. The prince quickly looks away, muttering that it's nothing. The following morning, Ein is escorted by Tina into the heart of the bustling academic district. The streets are a chaotic sea of students, professors, and anxious parents. The prince takes it all in with wide-eyed wonder. Finally, the massive gates loom before them, and Tina announces their arrival at the prestigious Kingsland Royal Academy. With a final go get him and a salute, Tina sends him off. Ein navigates the marble halls searching for the testing arena. He finds it just as a student is sent flying across the room, slamming into a wall with a sickening thud, seeing the boy bruised and broken. Ein immediately scans his status to check the damage. A hulking, intimidating man sneers at the fallen boy, telling him to crawl back to his mother because he's pathetic. Ein glares at the examiner, a man named Rick, disgusted by his gutter trash attitude, with a roar that shakes the rafters. Rick bellows for the next victim to step up. As Ein watches the next slaughter, he's glad for the anonymity rule. At least he won't get prince treatment here. Rick continues to verbally abuse every student he tramples, failing them one by one. A line of hopefuls tries their luck, but they're all systematically dismantled by the examiner. Rick grunts that skills are fair game, so long as they aren't cowards using long-range weapons. Then his eyes lock onto Ein, the final candidate. As he steps into the ring, Ein decides to bench his shadowy Dullahan skills. They're way too lethal for a school exam. He decides to rely on raw, unadulterated strength. He draws his blade and takes a firm stance against Rick. The man beckons him with a crooked finger, eager to break one last kid. Without a word, Ein explodes forward, a blur of speed and precision that catches everyone off guard. Rick is rattled for a split second, but manages to parry. He lets out an arrogant chuckle, acknowledging the kid actually has some meat on his bones. Ein doesn't let up, moving with blinding speed and peppering the examiner with strikes from every angle. He's playing the long game, using his small frame to dance around Rick's reach and sow confusion. He spots a golden opening and lunges for the win. However, Rick's reflexes are monstrous. He counters with a heavy blow that sends Ein skidding back. He sneers, declaring the match over before it even started. Ein silently admits the guy is legit. Rick is actually more dangerous than the standard castle knights. Even so, he refuses to back down or accept defeat. He grits his teeth and tries to steady his breathing while the examiner keeps throwing verbal daggers, trying to shatter his mental fortress. But Ein is a brick wall. He won't let some trash talker break his concentration. Seeing that the boy's resolve is made of iron, Rick scoffs, declaring he's done playing nice with a pampered little noble brat. Realizing the gloves are coming off, Ein asks if skills are permitted as long as they aren't magic. Rick tells him to bring whatever he's got, fully convinced that no gimmick will save the kid. Ein's blood begins to boil. The examiner's insults toward his swordsmanship feel like a direct spit in the face to Joyd and Tina, the mentors who poured their souls into him. When a man dares to mock his mother, the one person who sacrificed everything for him, a volcano of pure, unadulterated rage erupts from within his soul. Rick's smirk vanishes as the air begins to hum and crackle with raw pressure. Consumed by fury, Ein activates his Dark Knight skill. The examiner's eyes nearly pop out of his head as he witnesses monstrous, dark tentacles bursting from the boy's back. He demands to know what kind of freakish power this is, but Ein just glares, noting that there's no rule against it. With a predatory focus, Ein readies his wooden blade for the real fight. Rick regains his smug composure, taunting that a few extra limbs won't save an insect from getting crushed. That final insult is the spark that blows the powder keg. The examiner lunges forward and the air fills with the sound of clashing wood. Rick admits that those extra arms are giving him a workout, but he insists that a flashy trick won't buy a victory. He dances around the shadowy strikes and counters with heavy blows, never stopping the stream of insults for even a second. Sucking in air, Ein realizes that simply having phantom hands isn't enough to topple a pro like Rick. He pushes his mana to the limit. A second wave of power surges through his veins, supercharging his muscles. Rick remains unimpressed, but Ein is fueled by a singular, burning desire to make this man pay for every word he spat at his family and teachers. He unleashes a strike so fast it whistles, and Rick barely manages to pivot out of the way. Ein becomes a relentless shadow, smothering the man with a barrage of attacks that leaves him no room to breathe. Rick tries to find his rhythm, but his defenses are buckling under the sheer weight of the phantom hands. With the examiner finally off balance, Ein spots the perfect opening and leaps into the air for a finishing blow. He flashes a cold, triumphant smile. Having read his opponent's move like an open book, Rick manages to catch the strike, but the sheer force of the impact sends him skidding backward across the stone floor. Ein smirks, noting that committing both hands to a block was a fatal mistake, and uses his phantom hands to rain down chaos. An enraged Rick tries to shove him off, but it's too late. Ein commands another shadow limb to strike with the force of a battering ram. The impact finally shatters Rick's weapon into splinters. They scramble to overpower one another, pouring every ounce of their being into this final, desperate clash. Ein pushes his mana into overdrive, commanding his phantom hands to explode. A deafening blast rocks the arena, shrouding the entire stage in a thick veil of dust. As the haze clears, battered and bruised with visible gashes across his arms, Rick somehow drags himself back to his feet. He stares at Ein with newfound respect, admitting he's never seen a kid with that much bite. Impressed by the man's durability, Ein asks if they're going for round 2, but Rick shakes his head, saying the duel is over. He gestures to the cratered floor and the rubble around them, noting that between the wrecked arena and his own fractured bones, someone else is going to have to finish the testing for the day. Coming down from his high, Ein is suddenly hit by a wave of guilt and bows an apology. he admits he let his temper take the wheel, and fully expects to be disqualified and sent packing for his behavior. Rick just raises an eyebrow and limps over to the worried boy. He thumps the kid on the head with a rolled-up scroll, grunting that a warrior who fights for his people is a true noble. He officially declares Ein has passed and shoves the certificate into his hands. Stunned, Ein bows again, offering a sincere apology for his earlier arrogance. But Rick just laughs, saying they both acted like hotheads. With the air finally cleared, Ein offers a respectful bow to the man who pushed him to his limit. With his passing grade secured, Ein practically floats down the academy hallways. He spots Tina and flashes a bright grin, eager to tell her he actually won the fight. His smile vanishes, however, when he realizes she's literally fuming with rage. She gives him a stiff congrats, but the boy can feel the heat radiating off her and asks what he did wrong. She snaps that revealing the Dark Knight skill was a reckless move and reminds him of his oath to keep his trump cards hidden, yet he played his hand in front of a whole crowd. He looks down, his hands trembling as he apologizes. He just couldn't stay quiet while they were being insulted. Seeing his regret, Tina takes a long breath to settle her nerves and reminds him that flaunting that kind of power is like putting a target on his back. Worried about the damage he caused, he asks about Rick. Tina assures him the Academy's healers are top tier and that examiners are built tough. She then mentions that Rick was a legendary high-rank adventurer, and the fact that a 7-year-old just floored him is a massive achievement. Ein isn't even surprised. He knew from the first clash that the man was the real deal. On the trek back to the palace, Tina gives him a fair warning. The king is definitely going to hear about the explosion, so he'd better have a good excuse ready. Sure enough, a few days later, Silva delivers a stern lecture on the dangers of showing off. Ein takes it on the chin, bowing to his grandfather while Olivia tries to play the peacemaker. The king sighs, noting that with his 7th birthday coming up, the time for games is over. His royal duties are about to begin in earnest, especially as the crown prince. To start things off, he's been ordered to join the royal delegation on a trip to Magnaport. Olivia is beaming with pride that her son is finally taking his first steps as a leader, while Ein is just left blinking in shock at the sudden responsibility. Meanwhile, miles away, Krone stands on a balcony staring out at the infinite horizon. Her grandfather calls her back inside, but she stays for a moment longer, pressing the blue crystal to her heart. Back in Estal, Warren gives Ein a tour of the kingdom's naval might, showing off the massive warships docked in a perfect line. In awe, he looks at the sprawling harbor, amazed by the sheer scale of Magnaport. Tina explains that this fleet is the iron shield of their nation. Magna is one of Estal's crown jewels. By day, the markets are a chaotic symphony of traders and fresh catches. It's also a military fortress, and today they're here to inspect the steel and the men who keep the seas safe. As they walk the docks, they add a final stop to the list, inspecting the very first shipment of Hulo crystals since Olivia secured the trade deal. Warren is eager to show Ein what raw sea crystals look like and signals Tina to open the transport crates. The knight steps forward and expertly shatters the heavy iron locks with her blade. The prince peers inside at the treasures and notes that, to him, they just look like giant chunks of rock salt. Warren lets out a hearty laugh, admitting the boy isn't entirely wrong. The old man then winks, telling him that was the final item on his official royal to-do list for the day. Ein thanks him, genuinely surprised by how much he enjoyed the work. Since he's off the clock, he asks for a moment to find a souvenir for his mother, feeling a bit guilty that she had to stay behind this time. His grandfather is thrilled to see the boy exploring the world on his own terms. Warren asks for a moment of patience while Tina finishes up some last-minute paperwork on the ship. Ein is fine with that, but he politely declines Warren's offer to wait in a stuffy cabin. Since they're at the ocean, he'd much rather wait on the docks and watch the waves. However, Tina immediately goes into bodyguard mode, warning him that docks are chaotic places where accidents happen in a heartbeat. Warren chuckles and hands on the crimson gem of the earth. He explains it was carved from a dragon's heart and will act as a powerful protective charm. Even so, Tina tells him to stay within eyesight of the ship. Ein promises to be a good boy and wait right there until they're ready. Ein sits by the water, losing himself in the rhythm of the tides. It's the most peace he's felt in ages. The autumn air has a crisp bite to it, yet the sunlight feels warm and cozy against his skin. A wave of drowsiness hits him, but he's worried about looking unprofessional in public. He steals a quick glance around, making sure no one is watching the Crown Prince. He spots a neat stack of wooden shipping crates nearby, and figures they'd make a perfect hidden bunk. He squeezes into the gap between the boxes. As he settles in, he realizes that since his face isn't public knowledge yet, this might be his last chance to just be a kid. He lets out a contented sigh and curls up, the shadows of the crates keeping him cool. Staring up at the slivers of blue sky, he finds himself hypnotized by the gentle song of the waves. He slowly drifts off, thinking about how much this place reminds him of his old home in Roundheart. It's a bittersweet, nostalgic feeling. With the ocean as his lullaby, the prince finally falls into a deep, peaceful sleep. A presence stirs the air. In his dreams, Ein is wandering through a sun-drenched garden, hand in hand with his mother. The fragrance of the blossoms is intoxicating, and he murmurs about how wonderful they smell. In the dream, Olivia smiles warmly, agreeing that the scent is truly lovely. But then, a sharp sneeze jerks him back to reality. Soft, silken strands of hair had tickled his nose. Hearing a familiar voice, he slowly blinks his eyes open, greeted by a scent he could never forget. She giggles, wondering what his first words will be. Will he give her a proper greeting, or thank her for providing a lap pillow while he napped? Realizing the dream has ended, Ein's vision finally clears. He is staring straight into Krone's eyes. Overwhelmed, he reaches out to touch her hair, whispering how much he's missed her. She takes his hand, her eyes reflecting the same deep longing. Nearby, Tina watches the touching reunion with a knowing, gentle smile. Warren stands beside her, equally moved. Krone tells Ein that finding out he was actual royalty was the shock of a lifetime. Ein laughs, admitting it was a shock for him too. She confesses that since he crossed the ocean, she feared they'd never meet again, and this moment feels like a miracle. He asks if she traveled all this way alone. She shakes her head and points toward her grandfather and their retinue nearby. She explains that her father has officially taken over as Duke. After her grandfather's retirement, they were headed to a merchant hub for her health, but when her grandfather went missing, Olivia stepped in to smuggle them through Port Hulo. It would be a national scandal if people found out citizens of Heim were hiding in the heart of Estal. After she offers her own apology, Krone tells Ein he has nothing to feel guilty about and thanks him for waiting for her. Tina finally approaches, and Ein asks if her duties are done. She nods, having dumped the paperwork on Warren so she could keep an eye on him. Ein starts to introduce Krone, but Tina stops him. She already met the girl while he was snoring away. She then gives him a quick scolding for napping in the open. Softening her tone, she asks Krone if she'd like to join them for a walk through the bustling city. Krone turns to the prince, playfully asking for royal permission to join the party. Flushed and embarrassed, Ein quickly agrees. That evening, Krone meets with Olivia in private, pouring out her deepest gratitude for the protection and kindness shown to her family. The princess waves off the formality, telling the girl to drop the titles and speak to her like a friend. Krone obliges, and the princess's face lights up instantly. Krone then asks what was so urgent to discuss. Olivia looks her in the eye and asks what she truly wants for her future. Seeing the girl hesitate, the princess reassures her that whatever she confesses will never leave the walls of this room. Warren and Tina had grilled her earlier with the same question. She couldn't tell them the truth, that she only came because of Ein's invitation and her desperate need to see him. She tells the princess honestly that it's hard to speak her heart given their fragile political status. Olivia simply smiles and asks point-blank if Krone intends to spend the rest of her life here in Estal. With sudden steel in her eyes, Krone admits she decided that the moment she walked away from the August estate. The princess is momentarily stunned by the girl's conviction, but a triumphant smile soon spreads across her face. She radiates joy, welcoming Krone into the fold without a second thought. She decides right then that Krone will enroll in the academy next spring. It's a different school than Ein's, but it's overseen by Olivia's mother, the queen. Olivia vows to polish Krone into the most radiant jewel of the kingdom, ensuring no one would dare question her heritage. With tears prickling her eyes, Krone accepts the lifeline, moved by the princess's generosity. Later that night, the prince is back at his desk, drowning in the mountains of paperwork required of his station. Martha brings him a steaming cup of tea, gently suggesting it's time to call it a night. He smiles, promising he's almost done. He sips the tea, feeling the warmth spread through his tired limbs. He's determined to push through and finish the final stretch. Hours pass as he studies by candlelight until he finally decides his brain has had enough. Suddenly, a soft breath tickles his ear, making him nearly leap out of his skin. Krone is standing there, winking, and laughing at how easily he's spooked. Face turning bright red, he demands to know how she got in. She chirps that she just finished her own lessons and wanted to check on him. Feeling a bit exposed, he mutters that she should have just knocked. She teases him, saying he was so locked into his books he wouldn't have noticed a dragon entering. She adds that watching him work so hard has given her the spark she needed to double her own efforts. He smiles and tells her about the upcoming gala to celebrate his mother's return. Warren already sent him the formal invite. He confesses he's terrified of going, since he hasn't been officially unveiled to the high nobility as the crown prince yet. She tells him to man up. The real danger is her being there, not him. Her logic is enough to sway him. When he asks where she's off to now, she mentions she's heading to the castle's legendary grand bath. He tells her the place is huge and that she should soak away all her stress and take her time. She flashes a mischievous grin and asks if he wants to join her. He yelps in embarrassment, telling her absolutely not and shoving her out so he can sleep. Laughing at his reaction, Krone heads to the baths. At the party, Ein stands back and watches the elite of Estel mingle and laugh. It's heartening to see his family finally at peace and enjoying the festivities. Suddenly, Krone arrives, slightly out of breath. She apologizes for the delay, explaining she was caught up greeting other dignitaries. Ein is completely mesmerized, blurting out a clumsy compliment the moment he sees her in her ball gown. Krone returns the favor, noting that he cleans up quite well in his royal formal wear. They retreat to a quiet corner, where Krone admits Estel feels like a whole different world. She talks about the water train and the sheer level of advanced magitech technology that even commoners get to use every day. Looking out at the glittering lights of the capital, she remarks that the city looks like an overturned jewelry box. She also notices how magic stones seem to power every little thing in the kingdom. Ein nods, admitting he was just as shocked to see magic stones treated as everyday tools rather than rare treasures like in Heim. They watch the crowd together as Ein mentions this is his first grown-up party, since he's not quite 7 yet. Krone asks about his official debut, and he tells her it's set for next spring. She promises to give a speech for him and suggests he model his own address after someone he looks up to. He tells her about his admiration for the first king, his ultimate hero. The only problem is he speaks gently like his mother, whereas the king was a force of nature. Krone laughs, agreeing he's got a bit of soft touch. Suddenly, they overhear two nobles whispering nasty things about Krone, their faces twisted in disgust. They sneer that a girl from Heim is a stain on the palace floor. Krone squeezes Ein's hand, telling him it's fine and to just keep smiling so they don't win. Trying to shift the mood, she offers to go grab them some appetizers. He watches her gracefully navigate the crowd until Warren suddenly appears at his side. The Prime Minister asks where his partner went, and Ein explains she's on a snack run. Warren smiles, telling the boy he should enjoy himself since he's the real star of the show. The king wants to make sure Ein knows he's loved after everything he suffered back in Heim. Ein looks over at his grandfather, who gives him a warm, supportive wave from across the room. Warren drops the big news. The king is planning to make his status as Crown Prince official tonight. Ein is stunned. Meanwhile, over at the buffet table, a pompous noble blocks Krone's path, insulting her heritage and demanding she leave the party immediately. Warren tells Ein he'll handle the loudmouth, but the prince is already gone, appearing at Krone's side in a blur. He, fuming with cold anger, tells the man he has no right to insult his personal guest. The noble, not recognizing the boy, asks who he think he is to interrupt a high-ranking lord. He calls Ein a brat, shouting that every true noble of Estel despises Heim for what they did to Lady Olivia. He screams that treating those people like garbage is just poetic justice. Krone tries to pull Ein back, but he gently brushes her hand away, his eyes fixed on the noble. He flashes back to Heim, remembering how he and his mother were treated like invisible dirt while his father pampered his half-brother. But he realizes it wasn't Krone's fault, or even the country's. It was his own failure to make them see his worth. He was saved by his mother, who pulled him from the wreckage and brought him here. He tells the noble that if everyone hates Heim, then they should direct every ounce of that hatred toward him. The room goes deathly silent. Ein declares that he understands why they'd be disgusted by a crown prince who was tossed out by the very nation they hate. As the noble stammers in confusion, Ein clarifies that he isn't here to punish anyone. He blames his own past weakness for his mother's suffering and the mockery of being called a useless firstborn. But meeting Krone gave him the drive to prove everyone wrong. He apologizes for his past self, but warns the crowd that the boy they see now is a different monster entirely. He reaches out and grabs a high-density magic stone from a display, and a terrifying surge of power erupts through the room. The noble shrieks a warning that the stone is toxic, but the room freezes in awe as Ein effortlessly tames the violent energy. Gasps erupt as the glowing stone turns perfectly clear in his palm. He declares that no monster will ever defeat him, holding up the purified gem as proof. Having displayed a fraction of the power inherited from the first king, he looks the noble in the eye and asks, "Do you still think I'm unfit for this throne?" The king rises from his throne, looking like he's about to shut down the prince's reckless display of power. But he's stopped in his tracks by flashes of the legendary first king, mirrored in his grandson's fierce eyes. Ein turns to the crowd, commanding them to aim their resentment at him alone and spare Krone their malice. Lifting the purified, transparent gem high, he roars his name. Ein von Esthal, the official crown prince of the realm. He vows to walk the path of the first king and restore the glory of their ancestors. He lays down a challenge. If they accept him as their future king, they must accept Krone by his side. Inwardly, he winces, berating himself for letting his emotions flare up again, but Krone reaches out, directing his gaze toward the hall. He's absolutely floored when he sees the entire assembly of high nobles dropping to their knees in a synchronized bow of submission. They aren't just tolerating him, they are acknowledging their new master. And just like that, the disinherited boy has officially claimed the title of Crown Prince of Esthal. Following that explosive declaration at the Gala, a grand public debut is staged so every citizen of Esthal can catch a glimpse of their future sovereign. The masses are already obsessed, viewing his ability to purify magic stones as proof of his divine right to rule. The girls in the capital are swooning over his romantic defense of Krone. To them, it's a fairy tale come to life. Warren watches the public frenzy with a satisfied smirk, noting that the prince's popularity is skyrocketing. During a brief lull in the ceremony, Krone hands on a glass of water, a quiet moment between the two. Back at the palace, the king sighs, still reeling from how abruptly Ein forced his hand with that proclamation. Warren, however, reports that the nobility is practically eating out of Ein's hand, so the political fallout is zero. The king grumbles that he'd usually punish such a stunt, but he feels the boy has already paid his dues 10 times over a house-round heart. He then reflects on Ein's speech, realizing the prince's words were a perfect echo of the first king's own inaugural address. Warren is stunned. He never gave the prince those historical scripts, yet the boy spoke the words as if they were etched into his soul. He wonders if it's pure intuition or if Ein's obsession with history books has made him a reincarnation of the hero himself. He then pivots to Krone's progress, noting she's been pulling all-nighters to qualify for the elite Levi Girls Academy. He's already given her 3 potential career paths. Option 1, a top-tier civil servant. Option 2, a refined lady of high society. Option 3, the rigorous training required to possess the intellect and grace of a queen. Intrigued, the king asks which path the girl chose. Warren reveals that she's aiming for the stars. She wants to be a queen who is both a beacon of love for the people and a razor-sharp guide for the king. The king lets out a hearty laugh, realizing the ambitious girl essentially checked all of the above. He looks at the two of them through the window, convinced they are exactly the spark Esthal needs for a golden age. For a fleeting second, he sees a vision of the future, 2 legendary leaders standing at the helm of a global empire. Spring finally arrives, marking the day Ein and Krone officially begin their journey as academy students. Olivia is in full mom mode at the gates, double-checking their bags to make sure they haven't forgotten a single pencil. Ein just laughs, giving her an enthusiastic all clear. Since their schools are separate, Krone bids him a bittersweet farewell, promising to dominate her classes if he does the same. Olivia smothers her son in one last hug, nearly deciding to escort him right into his classroom, but Tina steps in to block the path. She reminds the princess that a royal visit would cause a total riot on campus, so she needs to stay in the shadows. Tina vows to be the prince's shadow, so Olivia can finally relax. Olivia smiles, but she can't resist a final jab, warning Ein that Tina could be a total airhead, so he'd better watch his own back. As the prince nods, Tina starts pouting in the corner. Ein and Krone share a final wave and head toward their new lives. Before they vanish into the crowd, Olivia shouts one last piece of advice. Don't forget to have some fun. With a beaming smile, Ein promises he will. A short while later, the carriage pulls up to the academy gates, and Ein is instantly hit by a massive wall of noise from the swarming students. Tina sticks close, acting as a shield as they navigate the chaos. She tells him the war zone is only outside. Once they're in, the academy is actually a peaceful sanctuary for learning. Ein raises an eyebrow. Considering his life so far, he can't imagine a school being relaxing. They weave through the sprawling, ancient grounds until they finally reach the grand main hall. Ein's eyes sparkle. He can't believe he's actually going to spend his days in such a majestic place. Tina drops the bombshell that her escort duty ends here. A specialized guide is taking over the tour. She whistles, calling over a boy who looks about Ein's age. The boy drops into a perfect, disciplined bow, acknowledging the prince. Tina introduces him as Dill Glacier, the son of Joyd and Martha. Ein's brain short-circuits. He didn't even know those two were a thing. While he's still buffering, Tina brags that Dill is a total prodigy, a knight cadet whose skills are already off the charts for his age. Still reeling, Ein has to ask for a triple check. Joyd and Martha are actually married? Tina confirms it. Apparently, they're just ultimate professionals who keep their romance strictly off the clock. The young knight reintroduces himself, pledging his life as the prince's guard. Ein starts to be casual, but Tina delivers a stern message from a king. No informal talk in public. He must maintain the royal mask at all times. Ein clears his throat, switching to his future king voice to greet the young knight properly. Dill is like a stone wall of formality, replying that serving the prince is his highest honor. Ein whispers that when they're alone, he can just call him Ein. Dill shuts it down instantly. He's a guard, not a playmate. Tina reminds Ein she'll be waiting at the gates later and forbids him from wandering off with Dill alone. Ein agrees, mostly because she's acting like a helicopter parent. He wonders if his incidents have permanently nuked her trust in him. With the briefing over, the two boys start walking down the quiet, polished hallways. Ein notices the lack of fanfare and asks if there's no big entrance ceremony. Dill confirms that the academy skips the fluff. Students head straight to class and then home. They reach a set of massive doors. Ein starts to enter, but Dill blocks him, pointing out that's the room for the common class too. He gestures to the golden-trimmed door next to it. Class 1. The elite. Ein looks up at a door that looks like it belongs in a treasury. Dill notes that Class 1 is for the monsters of the academy, the absolute top tier who get to flaunt their status. In this room, status doesn't matter, whether you're a prince or a peasant. You're only here if you're a genius. It's a pure meritocracy. Feeling the weight of the expectations, Ein tells himself he has to study until his brain melts to stay on top. He says goodbye to Dill and stands alone before the golden entrance. To his shock, the door doesn't even need a handle. It senses his presence and slides open automatically. He steps inside to find his new classmates, a group of kids who all look like they have main character energy. A few glances away, but most don't even look up. He heads for his desk, noting that there are only 10 students in the entire class. The small number makes him nervous. It's going to be hard to blend in. He takes a seat next to a werewolf student just as the teacher walks in. The man, Luke, introduces himself as their magic engineering professor and tutor for the year. He mentions he's a last-minute replacement, as the previous teacher suddenly resigned. He doesn't sugarcoat it. You're all geniuses. Just give me results or get out. Then he dismisses them. The class stares in disbelief. School started 30 seconds ago. Before vanishing, Luke adds the kicker. As long as they maintain top grades, attendance is optional. Just don't fail the finals. He tells them the labs and professors are at their disposal 24/7. Then he just leaves. The room is silent. Ein is stunned by the level of freedom the top class gets. His seatmate chuckles, introducing himself as Lauren, a magic engineering fanatic. When Lauren asks for his specialty, Ein keeps it simple, swordsmanship. Lauren's eyes go wide. Wait, you're that guy? The one who pulverized the examiner? He whispers that rumors say Ein turned the man's face into a pancake and leveled the entire arena. The whole class is now staring at him. Ein offers a weak, awkward smile, praying they don't treat him like a walking natural disaster. Lauren asks for his name, but before he can answer, Dill bursts into the room to announce his arrival. Lauren recognizes Dill as the head knight's son and wonders why a high-tier cadet is acting like a bellhop. Dill doesn't hold back, addressing Ein with his full royal title in front of everyone. The classroom goes from quiet to dead silent as the students realize a prince is sitting among them. Dill asks if the prince is ready to begin his official tour of the facilities. Ein stands up and shakes the stunned werewolf's hand, offering a proper introduction at last. He then turns to Dill and suggests the knight joins them on the tour. Lauren politely bows out, claiming he has a research paper to turn in. Ein just beams at him, ready to conquer the academy. As he watches his classmate walk away, Lauren is reeling from the shock that his new seatmate is the literal crown prince of the realm. Dill takes charge, leading Ein through the sprawling academy grounds for a comprehensive orientation. Nearly breathless from the hike, Ein remarks that this place is a fortress in its own right, yet they've barely scratched the surface. Dill pledges his total devotion to guiding the prince, though he warns that his own academic schedule might occasionally pull him away. Ein nods in understanding, not wanting his loyal protector to sabotage his own future just to play tour guide. Dill won't hear of it, insisting that the prince's absolute safety is his sole purpose for breathing. Ein fights the urge to sigh, realizing Dill is as flexible as a suit of plate armor. Desperate to break the ice and find some common ground, Ein scans their surroundings for a conversation starter. He spots a group of girls nearby and asks Dill what his type is. Dill remains stone-faced, asking if the prince means physical traits or personality. Excited by the opening, the prince is sure he's finally bridged the gap between master and servant. To his disappointment, Dill's expression only sourers, looking utterly baffled by the trivial inquiry. The guard demands to know why the prince is wasting breath on romance, yet he decides to humor him anyway. Dill confesses he's only interested in someone who can hold their own in a life-or-death brawl and outmuscle him. He dreams of a warrior who shields the weak with her life, ideally standing at a towering 190 centimeters. Hearing this, Ein immediately pictures Tina. Dill adds that anyone who can rival his father's strength would be the perfect match. Ein tries to imagine Tina with bulging muscles, but the mental image is just too cursed to handle. Ein notes that a woman like that is a rare breed, but tells Dill to keep the dream alive. Dill is genuinely moved by the encouragement, noting that his peers usually just mock his specific taste as a total joke. Validation from the prince hits Dill deep, and Ein senses the icy barrier between them finally starting to thaw. It's a tiny victory, perhaps only a centimeter of progress, but a step forward is a step worth celebrating. The prince invites his guard to a private dinner, eager to dig deeper into the boy's stoic personality. Dill accepts the command, but the reality of the evening is far from the chilled-out meal Ein imagined. Instead of sitting with him, Dill stands at attention like a statue behind his chair, scanning the room for threats while Ein eats alone. Meanwhile, over at the prestigious Levi Academy for Young Ladies, Krone finds herself the center of attention. The noble girls are swarming her, desperate to play matchmaker for their highborn brothers. Krone puts on a look of modest regret. She gently reminds them that a mere commoner like herself could never hope to marry into the aristocracy. The girls won't take no for an answer. With the Chancellor's backing and her legendary beauty, any noble would be a fool not to fall for her. She thanks them for the flattery, but insists she won't risk causing a scandal for her royal benefactors. Deeply impressed by her humility and grace, the girls back off with blushes, completely captivated by Krone's radiant smile. Krone reflects that while her stay as an exchange student is temporary, following in Olivia's footsteps here will surely sharpen her edge. She vows to study until her eyes burn, making every second in these hallowed halls count toward her ultimate ambition. That same night, a cold panic sweeps through Esthel's maximum security prison. The knights are in a frenzy after discovering that one of the kingdom's most dangerous inmates has vanished into thin air. The cell's lock is a high-level magic artifact, leaving the guards baffled as to how a breakout was even possible. The chief demands the duty roster immediately. He needs to see every name on the staff list from the last few shifts. As he scans the names, a cold sweat breaks across his forehead. The fugitive is known as the Slacker, a lethal vampire who represents a catastrophic threat to the kingdom's stability. A former high-tier adventurer and blood-soaked assassin, he's a man who would kill a king for the right pile of gold. Somewhere in the shadows of the capital, the vampire perches atop a clock tower, wearing a predatory grin. After finishing his lectures, Ein bids Lorne farewell. In the corridor, Dill is already on high alert, asking the prince how he's settling in. The prince notes the academy's relaxed rules are a bit disorienting. He then asks Dill about the mysterious disappearance of the previous professor. Dill's voice drops to a whisper, revealing the scandal was buried deep. The old teacher was a monster hiding behind title. His name was Magnus, a high-ranking noble with a disturbing, near-obsessive fascination with lethal toxins. Magnus had been using his position to torment commoner students, but an investigation during Ein's enrollment finally exposed his corruption. Dill reveals he personally assisted in the interrogation, discovering Magnus was building a network of influence within the nobility. Currently, Magnus is rotting in a dead-end desk job, but Dill admits he pushed for a far more permanent punishment. His sense of justice burns too brightly to let a snake like that walk free. Ein is in total agreement. He has zero patience for people like Magnus. Despite his status, Ein has never been one to throw his weight around as a royal. He values blood and sweat over bloodlines. Respect is earned by actions, not inherited by birth. Dill is visibly impressed by the prince's grounded worldview, offering a rare, genuine smile. Ein tries to use the moment to get Dill to use his name, but the guard snaps back into duty mode, refusing to overstep his bounds. Shortly after, Tina arrives to take over escort duties for the trip back to the palace. Tina spots a patrol squad nearby and signals for Ein to hold his position. She needs a quick word with the guards and tells the prince to stay put. She warns him not to wander off into the crowd, and Ein gives her a cheeky assurance that he'll be a good boy. As he waits by a lamppost, he spots trouble. 3 shady thugs have cornered a group of defenseless girls. The girls are shaking, trapped against a wall as the men close in with predatory intent. Judging by their uniforms, Ein realizes they are Krone's classmates from the Levi Academy. The thugs mock the girls, realizing they don't have a nightly escort to protect them. As one man reaches out to grab a student, Ein teleports into the fray, standing like a wall between the victims and the predators. The tension is electric. The thugs laugh at the little hero and tell him to get lost, but one loses his temper and throws a haymaker. Ein dodges effortlessly, then snaps the man's arm back until he screams in agony. The other two realize his uniform belongs to the Royal Academy. Enraged, they decide to swarm him together. They sneer at his sudden silence, thinking he's finally terrified of the odds. Before they can move, a shockwave of raw power slams them into the pavement. Tina has returned, and she is absolutely livid. She demands to know why the prince treats his life like a disposable toy. Ein defends his meddling, but Tina warns him that a dead prince saves nobody. Now, he has to answer to the king. Back at the castle, Olivia and Tina can't help but tease Ein for somehow surviving yet another lecture from his grandfather. They look to Queen Larlua of the Dark Elves for support, expecting her to be the bad cop. Instead, the queen beams, praising Ein's gallantry as the mark of a true hero and a perfect sovereign. Tina is crushed. She was counting on the queen to provide some scared straight wisdom to keep Ein out of trouble. Larlua ignores the grumbling and leads her grandson to the secret vault for a reward. He is stunned when she presents him with a jet-black dagger. It's a masterwork weapon. It's designed specifically to channel the Dullahan mana he absorbed. Ein hesitates, feeling unworthy of another relic, but Larlua won't hear it. The queen and Olivia insist that the crown prince must be armed with nothing but the best. He finally accepts. The moment his fingers wrap around the hilt, the weapon feels like a natural extension of his own soul. A look of pure delight washes over his face as he beams at his grandmother. He pours out his thanks for the legendary blade. The two women are instantly defeated by his charm, pulling him into a group hug while gushing over how handsome he's becoming. Later, Ein finds Krone and excitedly draws the new dagger to show it off. Krone admires the sleek, lethal design, noting that it fits his vibe perfectly. The moment is ruined when Katie bursts in, demanding they focus on the problem child of his collection. She points to the cursed magic stone he'd asked her to investigate. She's hit a total dead end. She can't figure out the nature of the curse or its origin. Ein suggests hit the Royal Library's forbidden archives, but Katie is one step ahead. She's already scoured the records for similar cases and found absolutely zero leads. Feeling the frustration, Katie bluntly tells Ein he's a useless crown prince for not having the answers. Insulted, Ein gives her ears a sharp tug until she yelps. Krone has to step in to stop the bickering. Katie, desperate for data, proposes a radical and dangerous plan. She wants him to partially absorb the stone's mana. Ein realizes she's been baiting him into this from the start. She admits it, but promises her counterspells are ready to neutralize any backlash. She vows to shatter the containment unit the second things go sideways. Krone looks worried, but Ein is ready to gamble. He reminds her he's handled volatile mana before, and they need a breakthrough now. With a steady hand, Katie breaks the ancient seal. Silence fills the room. Nothing happens at first. Katie tells him to seize the moment and make contact with the stone. As his fingers graze the surface, the atmosphere suddenly turns heavy and suffocating. An eerie, otherworldly voice begins to echo through their minds. Katie panics. She screams for him to reseal the stone, but Ein finds himself paralyzed. Suddenly, his phantom hands burst forth, thrashing with a violent, chaotic energy of their own. Katie, thinking he's showing off, yells at him to drop the tentacles and focus on the stone. Gasping for air, Ein chokes out the terrifying truth. He's lost control, and his body is moving on its own. He cries out that his body isn't listening to him anymore. As he battles for control, Katie scrambles to force the volatile stone back into its container. After a desperate struggle, they finally slam the seal shut. The sheer force of the mana burst, sending a mountain of books crashing down on them. As the dust settles, Ein groans that his limbs feel like lead. Katie isn't surprised, noting that manifesting every phantom hand at once would drain anyone. Suddenly, both girls freeze, their eyes widening as they point at his arms. Perplexed, he looks down at his own limb, only to find it encased in sleek, formidable armor. This sudden physical evolution after touching the dark stone leaves the entire room breathless with shock. They stare at Ein's transformed arm, wondering how on earth a mere stone could summon such a legendary defense. Katie frantically asks if he overabsorbed the mana, but the boy swears he barely grazed it before his body moved. With a will of its own. It's then that he remembers Maggie's ominous warning about how magic stones possess a strange, magnetic attraction to one another. Certain crystals share a resonance, acting as if they are trying to reunite with lost pieces of their past lives. The Dullahan Stone and the Demon King's relic, for instance, react with such violent longing that they practically lunge at each other. That's exactly why the merchant warned him to never let his guard down when handling such high-tier artifacts. It seems the cursed stone in the vault was calling out to the power already sleeping within him. He stares at the crystal, those warnings echoing in his head, just as voices drift in from the hallway. Katie hisses at him to hide the spectral armor before they're caught red-handed. She tells Krone to distract Tina at all costs, fearing the vice-captain will have their heads if she sees this mess. The young girl tries to play the gatekeeper, insisting the room is a disaster area, but the vice-captain effortlessly sweeps past her. She finds the three of them, standing amidst the wreckage, wearing the most unconvincing everything is fine faces in history. By some miracle, the armor flickers out of existence just in time, and the prince only receives a light scolding for turning the library into a playground again. Tina reveals she's actually there to deliver a mysterious, heavy package addressed to Katie. Recognizing the sender immediately, the researcher tears into the wrapping with manic energy. Her eyes gleam like jewels as she reveals a tome she's been hunting for months, muttering about another secret item in the back as she asks Tina to help unbox it. The prince's jaw drops at the sight. The book's opulent, gold leaf binding clearly cost a year's worth of a royal allowance. Noticing his awe, Katie grins and explains it's a legendary masterpiece detailing the life of the Demon King. The title sends a chill down Ein's spine, while Katie donneth elegant silk gloves to protect the ancient pages. But as she scans the first chapter, her excitement turns to a look of utter bewilderment. She can't decipher a single syllable. It's written in ancient Elvish, a dead script that only a handful of living elders can still comprehend. To their dismay, even Tina, who has spent far too much time in the human capital, finds the letters completely indecipherable. Krone, peering at the illustrations, spots something familiar and beckons Ein over. It's a portrait of a warrior with a commanding aura. The boy is stunned to realize this is likely Dullahan, who appears startlingly human and bears a haunting resemblance to the prince himself. Refusing to be defeated by a language barrier, Katie dashes off to find a translator, ordering Tina to guard the priceless cargo. Left to her own devices, the knight tidies the room before her curiosity gets the better of her. She glances at the unreadable masterpiece left on the table. And despite Katie's claims of it being an impossible script, she finds herself reading the cover with perfect clarity. She checks the hallway to ensure she's alone, then flips through the pages until she hits a portrait of a hauntingly beautiful woman, the Elder. Suddenly realizing she's prying into secrets she shouldn't know, she quickly snaps the book shut and flees to finish her deliveries. Back at the academy, Professor Luke tosses a stack of pamphlets onto the desks, telling the students to check the date for the upcoming festival. Apparently, it's time for the legendary Inter-Academy competition. It's a massive annual event designed to foster friendship, featuring everything from high-stakes debates to magical duels. While Ein wonders which of his elite classmates will be stepping up to represent them, he's floored to learn that absolutely no one is participating. The upperclassmen are just too powerful, making the gap in skill feel like a literal canyon. It feels like a total setup to Ein, especially since the official invitation was conveniently delayed until a week before the start. When the lecture finally ends, he slips away to the training grounds for some solo practice. The arena is a cacophony of clashing steel as students hone their techniques. Ein steps inside, offering a respectful nod to the instructor, determined to push his limits today. Rick is already waiting for him, fully healed and sporting a grin that says he's ready for some payback. But instead of a sparring session, Ein is slated to face his usual nightmare, the Red Bison. Rick nudges him, with a laugh, joking that the kid is picking fights with monsters that would make a veteran's skin crawl. Given how their first meeting went, Ein expected a permanent grudge, but their relationship has turned into a surprisingly easygoing mentorship. Ein calls forth the spectral armor around his frame, his eyes locking onto the center stage. Rick, playing the part of the seasoned pro, gives him one final don't die look of confirmation. He taps a sequence into the control console, and the arena floor erupts in light, manifesting a gargantuan, snorting Red Bison. The holographic beast is programmed not to kill, but the bone-shattering impact it delivers is 100 authentic. Having bested the beast with his blade before, Ein decides it's time to try something a little more Dark Knight. The massive, horned juggernaut thunders toward him like a freight train. But instead of drawing his sword, Ein shocks Rick by tossing his weapon aside and meeting the beast, head-on, grabbing its lethal horns with his bare hands. He digs his heels in, halting the multi-ton creature's momentum in a spray of dirt. With his muscles screaming and his feet carving furrows into the platform, he exerts a burst of Herculean strength, flipping the entire beast over and slamming it into the ground. The hologram flickers and dissolves into data as Ein raises a triumphant fist. Rick immediately delivers a stinging smack to the back of the student's head. It's a stupidity tax for trying to bench press a charging bison with nothing but raw ego. Ein grumbles that an emergency might leave him no choice, but Rick warns him that a real prince uses his brain to make sure those emergencies never happen. After class, he heads to a local cafe to wash away the sweat with a relaxing tea session alongside Tina. Between complaints about Rick's training methods, he confirms he'll be sitting out the upcoming tournament. Tina encourages him to at least show up and cheer for Dill, who's set to face off against the reigning fencing champ. Just then, the bell chimes as a group of elegant girls enters the shop, with Krone walking right at the center of the clique like a true protagonist. Their eyes lock for a split second, and for reasons even he can't explain, he panics, diving behind a nearby bush to hide, a move that earns him a look of sheer disbelief from the girl. When Tina calls him out on his cowardice, he lamely claims it was just a tactical reflex. To make his nightmare complete, the group picks the table directly behind his leafy hiding spot. One of the girls starts gushing about how the prince personally swooped in to save her from thugs the other day. The coincidence is so thick it makes Ein want to vanish into the floorboards. Knowing she's a frequent guest at the palace, the girls start prying for tea on what the crown prince is really like. Ein strains his ears, holding his breath as Krone prepares to spill the beans. She starts by calling him a handful and a bit of a troublemaker, but her voice softens as she describes him as the kindest soul she knows. A boy with the heart of a true hero. She whispers that being by his side is the only place in the world she truly feels at home. Ein turns a bright shade of crimson at her confession, while the girls erupt into high-pitched squeals of pure excitement. As they continue to fawn over the ideal prince, Ein realizes she must be doing this to torture him. Tina offers to put him out of his misery, but he insists he can endure it a bit longer. However, the moment Krone starts detailing his secret experiments with Katie, he knows he's hit his limit. He stands up and interrupts the revelations, and Krone just shoots him smug, gotcha smile. The other girls shriek in surprise at his sudden appearance, scrambling to their feet as one stammers out a frantic thank you for his heroism in the academic district. Desperate to change the subject, he asks Krone if she's heading back to the castle. When she nods, he extends a hand, formally inviting her to walk home with him. A silent apology for his bush diving stunt. The explicit invitation is his way of making amends for the awkwardness. She bows gracefully, bidding her stunt friends farewell and leaving them gawking as they walk away. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Dill is cutting across the courtyard on his way home. When a flicker of movement by the main gate catches his sharp eye, he narrows his gaze, wondering who would be lurking around the perimeter after hours. Spotting a suspicious silhouette, he drops his gear and sprints toward the intruder at full speed. But when he rounds the corner, the shadow has vanished. He has no way of knowing that he's being watched by cold eyes from the very top of the academy walls. The day of the tournament finally dawns. The air vibrates with the roar of the crowd as the best clash in a spectacular display of fencing, magic, and wit. Ein walked alongside Dill, his jaw dropping at the sight of the gargantuan Colosseum. The arena was so massive that you could comfortably fit a small castle inside the central plaza. Dill excused himself to prepare for his match, and when Ein promised to cheer the loudest, he noticed his guard was wound tighter than a guitar string. The prince tilted his head, asking his companion if he was actually feeling a case of the jitters. Dill looked startled that the prince had read him so easily, clutching his chest in embarrassment for showing such a shameful and rookie lack of composure. Ein just chuckled, admitting it was a relief to see that even a prodigy like Dill gets nervous. When Dill asked for an explanation, Ein teased that he'd spill the beans only if Dill called him by his name. Naturally, the guard chose a stiff bow and a swift exit instead. As they parted ways, a familiar voice drifted from behind, expressing shock that Dill was capable of showing any emotion at all. It was Tina, beaming at the prince, and clearly delighted to see the two boys bonding so quickly. She offered to show him to the VIP seats, but Ein realized he'd left a prized pen back in the classroom. She walked him to the gates, where they split up so he could make a quick run for his forgotten gear. Ein sprinted toward the school building, noting that the campus felt eerily vast and hollow without the usual swarm of students. Suddenly, a strange scent hit him, a chaotic blend of aromas wafting from the direction of the cafeteria terrace. The moment his back was turned, a group of shadowy figures flickered through the corridors. He sensed a presence, but the intruders vanished just before he could spot them. Meanwhile, in the elite rookies lounge, the vampire known as Slacker let out a heavy, bored sigh. The plan was for the room to be empty, but he'd been forced to jump Lauren, who had the bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. When his cohort asked what's next, Slacker claimed the kid wasn't part of the contract and he'd toss him aside later. But as Lauren let out a sigh of relief, a cruel spark ignited within the vampire. He changed his mind on a whim, deciding he deserved a little snack as a bonus for his hard work. Clamping his hand around the boy's throat, the vampire hissed that he hadn't tasted blood in weeks. He noted he'd never tried werewolf blood before and mockingly asked the student for a taste. Of course, the answer didn't matter. The predator was going to take what he wanted regardless of the prey's consent. He threw his head back in a laugh, baring his fangs in a room he believed was a tomb of silence. Right then, the doors flew open. A new presence stepped in, finally identifying the source of the chilling atmosphere. Lauren trembled with hope at the sight of the prince, who was currently boring a hole through the vampire with his gaze, and demanding to know exactly what he thought he was doing to his friend. Slacker blinked at the intruder, wondering how on earth the brat got past the professional guards outside. Ein simply replied that he'd put them all to sleep the second they tried to get handsy. The news that his pros were leveled by a child sent the vampire into a seething rage. Nothing disgusted him more than incompetence. He clawed at his own head in frustration, drawing blood with his own nails. Unmoved by the display, Ein calmly advised him to go quietly, but the vampire snarled that he'd had enough of iron bars. Without another word, the boy drew his blade and lunged, igniting a full-throttle assault. He unleashed a blur of thrusts, successfully forcing the enemy to drop Lauren to defend himself. As the prince caught his falling friend, Slacker touched a fresh cut on his face, genuinely shocked the kid had managed to draw blood. A twisted grin spread across his face as he admitted the boy had some serious wheels. Ignoring the praise, Ein demanded their identity and their endgame. Slacker revealed they were just mercenaries hired by a noble with a massive chip on his shoulder against the academy. That was the end of the free trial of info. He warned the boy to leave unless he wanted to die. With a flick of his wrist, he deployed a smoke bomb that choked the room. As a veteran adventurer, Slacker knew better than to underestimate even a royal brat. Through the gray haze, a crushing kick slammed into Ein's ribs, sending him skidding across the floor. Fighting a seasoned killer with zero visibility was a recipe for disaster. Tina's warning about hiding his true power flashed through his mind. It would be a catastrophe if anyone saw his secret, but this monster had laid hands on his friend. Slacker vanished into the mist, raising his blade to carve the boy open and savor every drop. He didn't even get within striking distance before a blunt force slammed into his gut. Bewildered, he stared as a dark, phantom hand erupted from the boy's shadow. Ein swung the appendage like a whip, shattering the academy walls, and letting the wind sweep the smoke from the room in an instant. The tactical advantage was gone. Now it was a fair fight. Stepping forward with cold authority, the prince declared the vampire under arrest for the crime of hurting Lauren. Slacker laughed, calling the boy arrogant for landing a single lucky hit, and warning him that a child could never grasp the gap between them. He snatched a hunk of rubble and hurled it like a cannonball. Ein shattered the rock with a single strike, only to find the vampire had vanished from his line of sight. Using the airborne debris as stepping stones, the vampire danced through the air and reappeared behind the boy's neck. Done with the games, he went for the throat. Slacker lunged with a lethal, certain strike meant to end the prince's life right there, only to find his sword arm caught in the crushing grip of a second phantom hand. Trapped and helpless, he could only watch as Ein unleashed a brutal barrage of blows that rattled his very soul. The vampire gasped a final "Who are you?" before collapsing into unconsciousness. The prince retracted his power and rushed to check on Lauren. As he cut the ropes, Lauren asked about the other enemies, and Ein assured him that the trash had been taken out for now. Thinking back to the vampire's words, Ein focused on the mention of a noble employer with a grudge against the school. It clicked. Dill had mentioned a professor who was sacked for his extremist views and toxic behavior. Then there was that chemical cocktail of smells near the terrace. The puzzle pieces locked into place. Ein urgently ordered Lauren to flee to the main gate and bring Tina to the terrace immediately. Without waiting for a response, the prince vanished into the hallway. He reached the cafeteria terrace and declared that a disgraced professor had no business lounging in a place of learning. Sitting there was Magnus, the man himself. He smirked at the crown prince, acting as if it were an honor to be recognized. Ein's instinct was spot on. Only this man had the motive to burn it all down. When pressed on his plans, the man played the victim, but Ein had already sniffed out the truth the second he stepped onto the deck. The lake was rigged with a massive hoard of magic stones. It was obvious. He intended to force a mana overload and trigger a cataclysmic explosion. Magnus' smirk only widened. I noted he had an explosive friend back home, so he knew exactly what a ticking time bomb smelled like. Magnus was genuinely impressed, admitting he didn't expect the kid to sniff out his masterwork. He began a manic rant about how the academy and the crown had become cesspools of rot. He spat that the halls were crawling with commoners who didn't deserve his wisdom, claiming the line between the elite and the rabble had been erased. He tried to recruit the boy to his revolution, desperate to prove everyone was wrong about him, from his own family to the director, and especially Dill, the one who turned him in. His hatred for the young guard was palpable, but unfortunately for him, the prince loved every inch of Estal and this school, and he was prepared to break anyone who threatened them. 2. Magnus. It was a tragedy they couldn't see eye to eye. He noted that the bomb was an incredibly expensive masterpiece. The blast would be fueled by high-grade stones, turning the lake into a giant granite. The payload was enough to erase the entire academy from a map. The mana overload had already hit the point of no return. The fuse was lit. He screamed that everything would burn today, and a new, pure Esthal would rise from the ashes of his revolution. Magnus vowed to be the architect of a world rebuilt in his own twisted image. Rejecting the madman's vision, Ein charged, but the ex-professor reached into his coat and pelted him with refined crystals. To the boy's shock, the crystals detonated on impact, the shock waves sending him tumbling backward. They were specialized Magitech grenades. Ein couldn't understand why Magnus was staying behind if the blast was going to vaporize him too. The man laughed, claiming the enchanted jewels he wore would act as a perfect shield against the inferno. The second he heard that, Ein closed the distance in a flash of speed, his blade flickering as he severed the jewel necklace from the man's throat. The stones shattered against the floor, and with them, the man's only hope for survival. Magnus tried to drive the boy back with more shockwaves, but the prince knew he had the snake cornered and demanded his surrender. Magnus shrieked that he wasn't finished, that his destiny wouldn't end like this, but he simply couldn't keep up with the prince's godlike reflexes. Ein snatched the remaining tools from his grip and delivered a crushing blow to the gut that left the traitor gasping for air. Magnus stares in disbelief, gasping at how a mere child could possess such overwhelming strength. But his delusions of grandeur are cut short. Ein has finally cornered the traitor, and is ready to put a permanent end to this chaotic scheme. Ignoring the madman's screams that disarming the device will trigger an instant blast, Ein dives headfirst into the freezing lake, swimming toward the murky depths. At the very bottom, he spots a massive crate overflowing with high-grade magic stones, vibrating violently as they hit critical mass. Demolition isn't his area of expertise, but if these stones are the heart of the bomb, his unique gift is the perfect scalpel. He lunges forward, pressing his palm against the crate to begin the process of decomposition. Usually, the mana tastes like a delicacy, but this volatile cocktail is so repulsive it makes his stomach churn. Fighting through the nausea, he drains the energy until the stones turn into dull, lifeless husks, then kicks off the bottom and races for the surface. He breaches the water, gasping for air, a small smile playing on his lips for making it in the nick of time. Seconds later, Tina skids to a halt at the shore, a squad of royal guards trailing close behind. The prince is safe, though he grumbles about a sudden case of magical indigestion. Magnus watches from the bank, his eyes wide with shock that his masterpiece was neutralized. Even so, a sinister smirk lingers on the professor's face as the realization of his failure sets in, letting out a chilling cackle even as the knights drag him away in chains. Ein starts to recount the ordeal to the vice-captain, but suddenly freezes, a cold dread washing over him as he realizes something doesn't add up. Blowing up a school is a tragedy, but it's not a revolution. If Magnus truly wanted to topple the throne, he'd target the seat of power, and today, the king and Krone are sitting ducks at the arena. He remembers his sacred promise to be there, cheering for Dill at the height of the exhibition match. The terrifying truth finally clicks into place. He barks out that there's another bomb, his eyes snapping to the traitor, who simply grins like a demon at the revelation. As a distant tremor shakes the ground, Magnus mocks the prince, sneering that his realization has come far too late. Tina slams the criminal against a wall, demanding the location of his second trigger. There's no time to interrogate him. The arena is the only logical target, and Ein prepares to sprint toward the stadium. Tina tries to stop him, wanting to go herself, but Ein knows he's the only living off-switch for that bomb. If he hesitates, his family, his friends, and Krone will be wiped off the map. His logic is cold, and his resolve is like steel, leaving even the battle-hardened Tina speechless. Seeing she can't change his mind, she agrees to let him go, but only if she leads the way. Back at the arena, the clash of steel rings out as Dill's opponent lands a heavy blow to his chest, scoring a decisive point. The stadium erupts in a deafening roar as the swordsman raises his blade in triumph. Up in the royal box, the king narrows his eyes, wondering why his star pupil is playing so sloppily. Is it a lack of focus? Or is he holding back against his childhood rival? No one can figure out why the prodigy is struggling so much. None of them realize that Dill's eyes keep drifting toward the empty seat beside Krone. He's fighting for his life, yet his mind is spiraling, searching the crowd frantically for any sign of the missing prince. He clings to the memory of Ein's promise to be there, cheering him on to victory. With every passing second, the silence from the stands feels more like an omen that something has gone horribly wrong. The referee signals the next round, and the opponent lunges forward like a viper, leaving Dill to barely parry the strike while his heart remains heavy with worry for his lord. Just outside the gates, the prince and Tina are weaving through the chaotic sea of spectators. The main entrance is a bottleneck. If a bomb is hidden, it's likely planted at the neglected back gate. That area is a ghost town, home only to a weathered statue of the first emperor in the courtyard. At the mention of it, Ein's eyes light up with certainty. He knows exactly where the snake is hiding. As he nears the statue, a familiar, pungent magical scent hits him, radiating from the thickets at the base of the monument. The device is there, humming with unstable light and seconds away from meltdown. He pushes his legs to the limit, but the distance is too great. The stones are already shrieking with lethal energy. He almost falters, but Tina is a force of nature. She weaves a quick cast spell, triggering a kinetic blast that launches Ein through the air like a literal cannonball toward the bomb. With a silent prayer on her lips, she watches him fly, and as he hurtles toward the glowing device, Ein reaches out his hand with a roar of desperation. Inside the Colosseum, Dill is being pushed to the brink as his rival taunts him, asking if he's too distracted to even put up a fight. He'd better wake up, or today he'll lose his title as the city's strongest. The rival leans into a final, crushing offensive. Panic begins to set in, but then a voice cuts through the noise, a voice he'd know anywhere. Ein and Tina have appeared at the railing, covered in soot and gasping for breath from their frantic race. The prince locks eyes with his guard and issues a singular, royal command. Win. The world snaps back into focus for Dill in an instant. He flashes a confident smirk at his friend, apologizing because the title is staying right where it belongs. In a blur of superior technique, he systematically dismantles his opponent's defense and ends the match in a heartbeat. The audience sits in a stunned silence at the sheer display of dominance, until the referee's declaration sparks a thunderous, standing ovation for the undisputed winner. Those in the know share a relieved smile, grateful the crisis was averted. Dill leaps over the barrier, rushing toward Ein, but his joy turns to worry the moment he sees the prince's battered and scratched appearance. The city celebrates the victory, oblivious to the shadow that nearly fell over them. Days later, as a reward for saving the capital, Ein finds himself on a shopping spree with Krone and Tina. With the king's personal blessing and a heavy purse, they set out to paint the town red. The prince looks at the mountain of bags, nervously asking if they've gone a bit overboard with a new wardrobe. But the ladies insist he looks like a true icon. Besides, a future king simply cannot be caught wearing rags in public. Suddenly, a biting, icy gust sweeps through the streets, sending a violent shiver through the boy. Despite the massive haul of clothes, he realized he hadn't bought a single thing to protect his neck from the freezing sea wind. As he mutters about how much he needs a scarf, he notices Tina scribbling something furiously into her notebook. He ignores it, captivated by the majestic, crescent moon shape of the capital's harbor. The wonder turns to awe when he's told the harbor's unique shape wasn't designed. It was carved out by a monster attack. He asked what kind of beastly army could possibly tear a chunk out of a continent like that. The answer is even more terrifying. It wasn't an army, but the work of a single, solitary creature. A behemoth so massive it made Esthel's greatest warships look like bath toys, a master of the tides themselves. The undisputed tyrant of the deep, the legendary sea dragon. Just a mention of that name is enough to make any child's blood run cold. A creature that literally reshaped the world map and has claimed millions of lives over the centuries. With entire fleets sent to the bottom of the ocean, the body count left in the dragon's wake is second only to the devastation of the Demon King. They ask if the nightmare is finally over. The original was slain, but the beast is known to resurface roughly every century or two like a recurring plague. Calculations suggest the time for its return is fast approaching. It's a grim thought, but Tina quickly reassures them that Esthel's new coastal defenses are specifically designed to slay dragons. The kingdom is ready to protect its people, no matter what rises from the abyss. She apologizes for the heavy mood, but notes that as future leaders, they have to face the kingdom's shadows. To lighten the spirits, they start planning which boutique to hit next before the sun goes down. Krone takes charge, and knowing Tina has a secret mission, she accidentally loses the guards so Tina can hunt for a specific Asthalian treasure. They eventually stop at an elite shop, filled with the most exquisite silks and handcrafted accessories in the world. This is apparently the queen's personal favorite haunt. While the girls disappear upstairs to browse the luxury silks, the prince lingers on the ground floor. He waits until they're out of sight, then shyly calls over the shopkeeper, whispering about a very special item he's been eyeing. Later, the sun sets, and the royal castle erupts in a chorus of clinking glasses. A magnificent gala is underway within the palace walls, where the king and his high-ranking vassals are in high spirits, laughing and sharing stories. For the king, this is the most significant and proudest day of the entire calendar. Olivia and Krone step forward, presenting their beautifully wrapped gifts and wishing Ein a happy 8th birthday. He unwraps a custom pin bearing the royal seal and a stunning, master-crafted silver bracelet. His eyes light up with pure joy as he looks at the tokens of their affection, thanking both of them with a warmth that fills the room. But then, Ein notices that Tina has been MIA since the party kicked off. The ladies just share a knowing giggle, teasing about the vice-captain's legendary shyness. Hoping to give her a push, they suggest the prince take a breather on the balcony for a moment. He's confused by the sudden request, but they just give him a wink and practically shove him out the door. He steps outside, immediately met by the crisp, biting air of a quiet winter snowfall. Suddenly, a soft, familiar voice calls out to him from the shadows, acting as if their meeting is a total coincidence. It's Tina, her face flushed red and her hands hidden behind her back. She claims she's been stuck helping Martha all day, though Ein points out Martha's already inside. Parting it up, though he's totally clueless, he can tell she's a terrible liar. Blushing furiously, the knight fumbles for words. Her crippling shyness was still a major wall. Ein watched her in pure confusion until, finally, she lunged forward to wrap a thick, velvety scarf around his bare neck. Both their faces turned beet red as she stammered out a happy birthday. Wondering where she got the inspiration, he flashes back to her sharp gaze from earlier, specifically the moment he mentioned needing a winter scarf to survive the sea breeze. He finally connects the dots. The extra shopping trip wasn't a coincidence after all. Since she'd never picked out a gift before, the poor vice-captain had been lurking in the shadows all day, waiting for the perfect moment. She huffs in protest while he laughs at her raw sincerity, teasing that they're actually two of a kind. Ein reaches into his pocket and presents her with a gift, adding that he hit the same shop for her. His loyal assistant unwraps the box to find a breathtaking, intricate necklace. He admits he bought treasures for Olivia and Krone too, but he wanted her to have hers first since she's been his greatest pillar. She tries to play the I can't accept this card, so he pulls rank and makes it a royal decree. In exchange for her acceptance, he vows to wear her scarf every single day. Being around her feels so effortless that his jokes and teasing just flow without a second thought. She can't stop a radiant smile from breaking through as she cradles the necklace. Her face is glowing like a sunset, though she swears it's just the frost. Fast forward to a remote island. Ein is sprinting full tilt, hurting a weak slime monster like a pro. He signals to Bats, his agile classmate, who drops from the canopy to cut off the creature's retreat. With one clean strike, the monster is down, earning an impressed whistle from the prince. But just as Bats starts gloating about his legendary moves, another boy, Leo, shuts him down, pointing out that the prince did 90 of the legwork. The trio trades playful jabs and laughs as they keep moving. They're deep in the wilderness of a remote island for the Academy's high-stakes field exam. A month ago, Professor Luke dropped the bombshell about this survival trip scheduled right after the new year. When one student joked about it being a vacation, the professor's eyes turned cold as he shattered their delusions about what field work actually meant. Classes 1 and 2 are forced to merge into survival squads to trek across the island for 3 brutal days. The kicker? The island is crawling with live monsters, and they're banned from bringing food, water, or magitech. It's hunt or starve. After giving them the green light to pick their poison for teammates, Luke vanished as quickly as he appeared. Ein is slightly taken aback by the sudden survivalist turn and worries if he'll find crew. Right then, Lauren pops up with a grin, inviting him into their newly formed squad. As it turns out, the monsters of Class 1 are actually a pretty friendly bunch once the ice is broken. Now, they're officially deep in the island's interior, following the mission parameters. The professor's warnings were terrifying, but for the Academy's elite, this should be a walk in the park. Dill, acting as their official shadow, warns them that overconfidence is the first step toward the grave. His words go in one ear and out the other for Bats, who is still riding an adrenaline high. As the sun begins to dip, the group decides to dig in and set up camp for the night. Leo steps up, taking charge of the perimeter security. Tossing a coin as a catalyst, he weaves a complex pattern. With his fingers, chanting an incantation to deploy a high-level protective barrier. The team is floored. Having a shield like that means they can actually sleep without a monster chewing on them. They've managed to snag some wild rabbits for dinner, but the real crisis is the lack of fresh water. Every stream they find is nothing but a thick, undrinkable mud puddle. Since they have mud at least, Lauren offers to fix it using his engineering expertise. Dill intervenes, reminding him that magic items are contraband, but the werewolf just smirks. Claiming he's not using an item, he's building one from scratch. He begins reconfiguring the mana vectors of raw magic stones, transmuting their energy into a makeshift purification circuit. He tells them to toss the stones into the mud. Everyone watches in awe as the filth vanishes, leaving behind crystal-clear water. It's actually more refreshing than tap water, thanks to the mineral balance he infused. Dill is speechless. That kind of high-speed alchemy shouldn't be possible for a student, let alone look that easy. Watching Bats and himself handle the frontline brawls, while Leo and Lauren provide the genius-level backline support. I can't help but grin. They've accidentally stumbled into forming the ultimate dream team. Just then, the impulsive Bats pulls some wild fruit from his pack, claiming he found a hidden treasure nearby. The fruits are neon-colored and scream lethal poison to anyone with eyes. Leo squinted, confirming they definitely look like a known edible variety. The problem is they have a toxic twin that looks identical, and there's no way to tell them apart without a lab. Ein leans in, knowing his decomposition can neutralize any toxin. His hand glows as he tries to break down the poison, but the fruit doesn't spark. It's clean. With a confident nod, he announces that these are the 100 safe ones. To hide his cheat code ability, the prince just claims he saw it in a survival handbook once. Dill watches their teamwork with a silent, approving smile. With the water and fruit sorted, the rabbit is soon sizzling over the fire, smelling like a 5-star feast. An invites Dill to join them, but the stoic knight insists he's got his dry rations and won't be a burden. Ein pushes back, arguing that letting the extra food route would be a greater sin against the island. Stunned by the prince's persistence, the guard finally yields and takes a seat at the bonfire. To show his thanks, he pulls a secret stash of high-grade tea leaves from his gear. Technically, bringing luxury tea is a flagrant violation of the exam rules, but it's a time-honored tradition that the professors conveniently forget to notice. While Bats laughs about following the rules in the first place, the rest of the squad happily accepts the bribe, deciding to enjoy a moment of peace. The conversation turns to gossip as Bats leaks the news that Leo's fiancée has been officially chosen. The group explodes with questions, desperate for the details on the lucky lady. Ein plays it up, faking a dramatic sob, and acting heartbroken that his bestie kept such a secret from him. The night deepens as they bond over the fire, the cold island air forgotten in the warmth of their friendship. But when morning breaks, it's back to the grind and the mission at hand. A thick, suffocating fog has rolled in, swallowing the landscape whole. Dill warns them to move as one. Losing sight of a teammate here means losing them forever. The squad huddles close, but the fog turns into a white wall, so dense they can't even see the ground beneath their boots. Lauren tries to brainstorm a Magitech solution to clear the air, but he's coming up blank and curses his lack of field prep. Suddenly, Lauren takes a step into thin air. Before he can scream, he's plummeting. Ein snatches his hand at the last second, hauling him back from a jagged cliff that would have been a one-way trip to the afterlife. Everyone is shaken, but Lauren is alive. With the visibility becoming a death trap, the prince turns to warn Dill, but the elite guard has vanished into the white. They shout his name into the abyss, their voices swallowed by the damp air, until Bats catches a movement in a mist and barks a command to halt. Ein is confused for a heartbeat, but then the killing intent hits him. He drops into a combat stance, cursing himself for not sensing the ambush sooner. He tells the support duo to glue themselves to his back. Slowly, menacing silhouettes begin to emerge from the swirling white fog. Bat's jaw drops in horror. It's a swarm of crow butterflies, deadly predators that aren't even supposed to inhabit this part of the world. The team braces for a brutal, high-stakes clash against an enemy they never prepared for. The backline asks just how much trouble they're actually in. I notes they're physically weaker than the red bisons he spars with, but their true horror lies in their numbers. They hunt in swarms to bury their prey under a mountain of wings. The prince readies his phantom, hand keeping it as a hidden ace for when things get truly desperate. The butterfly monsters strike first, lashing out with long, whip-like tentacles aimed at the students' throats. The vanguard manages to parry the first wave. But the warning is clear. One sting means instant paralysis and becoming a living incubator for their eggs. They need to break through before the swarm fully circles them, with the frontliners creating a path of steel. After what feels like an eternity of sprinting through the treacherous terrain, the group finally gives the swarm the slip and dives into a hidden hollow. The team turns on Ein, hissing at him for his loud shouting that nearly served them up as a butterfly buffet. He hangs his head and apologizes, admitting he lost his composure out of pure worry for Dill. That being said, his guard is the top dog of the academy, so he should have known the guy could handle himself. Still, the situation was completely off. Monsters were prowling in territory where they didn't belong. With Tina away on official business, the comfort of a shadow protector was nowhere to be found. They have no choice but to push through the mist. They're halfway across the island, and reinforcements should be waiting at the finish line. The group decides to catch their breath for a moment before making a desperate dash to cover the remaining distance. Soon after, the squad is back on the move, running at full tilt through the rugged terrain. They move as a single unit, helping each other over obstacles, and playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek with the butterfly swarms at every turn. As the hours drag on, the physical toll of non-stop combat and sprinting peaks. Ein spots a nearby cave and suggests they dig in there, betting it's their best shot at a safe night's sleep. But Bats freezes at the entrance, pointing out purple gravel, a telltale sign of deadly miasma. It's a toxic vapor, lethal to any creature or human not native to this cursed environment. While the prince silently processes this new threat, the others are floored by how much monster lore the young royal has tucked away in his head. Later, the campfire's glow bathes the exhausted students in a warm, protective light. As he quietly tends to the embers alone, Ein's mind keeps racing back to one question. How did someone as elite as Dill get separated from them so easily? Lauren's intel said this was a safe route. These enemies shouldn't exist here. It's not just the island that's acting strange. The entire test feels like it's been rigged from the start. In the heavy silence of the night, a wild theory begins to take root in his mind. A spark of inspiration hits him, and he gazes into the dark woods, certain he's cracked the code. He gently nudges Lauren awake, whispering that he needs a huge favor. He has a specific question for the werewolf, recalling the custom Magitech tool Lauren built earlier to store their water supply. After confirming it can store volatile substances like miasma, Ein asks to borrow the device, and tells his sleepy comrade to drift back to dreamland. Armed with the modified tool, the prince slips out into the night to execute his solo mission. When dawn finally breaks, the group finds themselves, once again, locked in a high-stakes chase with a relentless butterfly swarm. The monsters are bloodthirsty, launching an ambush the very second the sun peaks over the horizon. Mid-sprint, Ein calls out to Leo, needing to coordinate a risky gamble while they run for their lives. Leo is baffled when Ein asks if his magic barrier can filter out airborne toxins. He pauses, stuttering that he can probably hold a sealed perimeter for about 10 minutes under pressure. That's all I needed to hear. He skids to a halt and turns to face the swarm, barking a royal command for Leo to deploy the barrier right then and there. Leo flinches in surprise, but his reflexes kick in, begging the frontliners to buy him just a few seconds to weave the complex spell. The vanguard leaps into action, drawing their blades to keep the buzzing nightmare at bay. Ein tells Bats that this whole crazy plan actually started with something he mentioned yesterday. The unexpected comment catches Bats completely off guard, so much so that he misses a dodge, letting a barbed tail coil tightly around his torso. Before the monster can strike, An is already moving, bisecting the beast in a single, fluid motion. Bats is safe, though his limbs feel like lead from a close call. Apologizing for the delay, Leo finally hammers his staff down, igniting a shimmering dome of protection around the squad. They're safe for the moment. The students collapse onto the grass, panting and desperate for air. Satisfied, Ein tells them to hydrate and leave the heavy lifting to him. When they ask where he's going, he just flashes a confident, roguish wink, and says it's time he took care of the pest control himself. With a burst of speed, he leaps outside the safety of the dome, using himself as live bait to lure the swarm. The entire cloud of monsters takes the bait, diving toward the lone royal like a tidal wave of wings, prompting a chorus of panic screams from his friends behind the glass. Instead of drawing his sword, he does something characteristically insane. He smashes Lauren's tool, releasing a concentrated explosion of miasma. The toxic cloud is so potent it instantly withers the surrounding forest into ash. One by one, the butterflies drop like stones, their lives snuffed out by the very poison they thrive in. In the heart of the fog, a lone silhouette stands tall, completely unfazed. The students can only stare in mute shock. Ein is standing there smiling, looking like he just stepped out of a bath without a single mark on him. They rush to his side, frantic to know how he survived, breathing in a literal death cloud. Seeing no way out, he casually reveals his cheat code, a natural immunity to toxins. The group lets out a collective breath of relief, though they beg him to stop giving them heart attacks. He cuts the chatter short. It's time to move. With the swarm decimated, the path forward is a breeze, and they encounter zero resistance. Soon, the salty air hits them as they reach the edge of the cape. Just a few minutes later, but the sight waiting for them at the cliffside leaves the three students staring in total disbelief. Dill and Tina are standing there, looking perfectly polished and not at all like they've been in danger. Dill drops to one knee, bowing deeply to his lord and praising his brilliant use of the team to crush the swarm. As Ein suspected, the king and prime minister had orchestrated the entire crisis as a trial by fire for the prince's growth. They had coordinated with the families and were hovering nearby the entire time, ready to intervene if things turned lethal. Breaking his usual playful persona, Ein speaks to Dill with a cold, stern edge, asking if he has any idea how much sleep he lost worrying. The three classmates flinch at the prince's sudden intensity, as does the young warrior, who tries to argue that the deception was for the prince's ultimate benefit. Ein cuts him off, warning him that he will dive into hell to save him if he ever pulls a disappearing act again. Dill resists, stubbornly insisting that his only role is to be the prince's shield, not the other way around. Ein snaps back that he has no intention of being mature or professional about his friends' lives. With eyes like flint, he demands a royal promise that Dill will never sacrifice himself like that again. The weight of the prince's distress finally sinks in, rendering the stoic guards speechless. Dill bows his head even lower, offering a sincere, heartfelt apology. The heavy mood vanishes as Ein grins, telling the guard that if he really wants forgiveness, he has to start talking to him like a friend. Expecting the usual stiff refusal, Ein starts to walk away with a dramatic sigh. But after a tense silence, the older boy speaks up, stating that using the prince's name so casually would be a bridge too far for his honor. Instead, he makes a personal plea. Hand over heart, he asks in a polite but informal tone if he can simply keep staying by his lord's side. Ein freezes mid-step, his jaw hitting the floor as he stammers, completely caught off guard by the sentimental curveball. Tina and the other students can't contain themselves, bursting into laughter at the prince's flustered face. Chuckling, the prince admits that such a smooth line caught him totally off guard. He grants the guard full pardon, but warns him it's a one-time deal. Their bond is forged even tighter in the wake of the trial, and the squad finally takes a moment to celebrate their hard-won survival. With the field exam officially cleared, the group begins their triumphant journey back to the heart of the capital, leaning against the deck railing. Ein mentions he knew Tina was stalking them through the woods the whole time. She admits she was using a high-level invisibility artifact and was genuinely rattled when she realized he'd spotted her. The boy reveals he caught her signature scent lingering even through the butterfly's stench. Their moment of peace is shattered when the entire battleship groans and tilts violently. The knight immediately moves to shield her young master as the alarm bells scream. A scout bellows from the crow's nest, A massive monster is surfacing. It's a kraken of nightmare proportions. A beast that has no business being in these shallow coastal waters. Tina barks orders to prime the cannons and prepare for a broadside, but she suddenly stops dead, her face turning a ghostly shade of pale. Ein is confused until he looks out and sees something massive erupt through the kraken's torso from below. They struggle to stay upright as the shockwaves from the impact batter the hull, but Ein's eyes are glued to the horizon. A single, effortless strike had torn a hole in the kraken larger than their entire flagship. The predator surfaced, massive fins and fangs long enough to snap a battleship in half like a dry twig. It was a living mountain of scales and teeth. A gargantuan whirlpool begins to spiral in the ocean as the Titan drags its prey into the abyss, making sure there is no escape. Tina stood paralyzed. Before her eyes, the legendary sea dragon was shredding the kraken like tissue paper. Its roar shook the very foundation of the ocean, nearly shattering the eardrums of everyone on deck. The vice captain snaps out of her shock and screams for the crew to retreat at full throttle, knowing their only window of escape is while the dragon is distracted by its gruesome feast. The ship carved through the waves with desperate speed, the crew's hearts pounding in a race against death. Tina pulled Ein into a protective embrace, but the boy couldn't stop his own limbs from shaking. It was his first terrifying encounter with the true king of the deep. Fortunately, the beast didn't pursue. Months bled into a year, and the dragon became a ghost story once more. Peace returned to the capital, and Ein's life settled back into a rhythm of grueling training and royal protocol. A year and a half of deceptive calm passed by. As classes let out, the prince's friends waved goodbye, their laughter echoing a promise to meet again tomorrow. Now 9 years old, Ein has officially ascended to his 3rd year at the academy. Tina arrives to escort him, showering him with her usual doting praise. However, she remains a strict guardian, reminding him that his home tutors are waiting and no detours will be tolerated. As he lets out a resigned sigh, she leans in close to straighten his crooked tie. With her face only inches away, Ein feels his cheeks flush, but luckily, she finishes the task before his embarrassment becomes too obvious. Just as they turn to leave, 2 frantic royal guards intercept them. Lungs burning from a dead sprint, they lean in and whisper a chilling report into the vice captain's ear. Her stoic mask cracks for a split second before she snaps into a sharp salute. Forcing a tight smile, she tells the prince an emergency requires her attention, and she immediately wheels around, vanishing into the distance. She casts one last look over her shoulder, sternly repeating her command. No detours. Straight home. The moment she's out of sight, Ein's gaze turns cold and authoritative as he demands the truth from the remaining knights. He drops the child persona, ordering them to speak plainly and without hesitation. Buckling under the sheer pressure of the crown prince's presence, the knights drop to their knees, confessing the unthinkable. The sea dragon has returned, and Tina has been deployed to the front lines to face it. This was a catastrophe-level threat. Ein storms into the main castle, demanding to know the king's exact location. The heavy atmosphere in the halls tells him everything he needs to know. The few knights he passes are standing like statues, their faces masked in grim, funereal shadows. Ein kicks open the heavy doors of the war room, announcing his presence with a bang, and finds the chamber packed with the kingdom's highest-ranking officials, including a visibly distressed Silva and Olivia. The young prince bypasses the pleasantries, demanding a status update on Tina's mission. The king maintains a chilling composure, signaling for the council to proceed even as the prince demands answers. Warren steps forward, confirming the nightmare. The sea dragon has breached the coastal waters of Magna. Ein grits his teeth, his worst fears realized. They'd spent 18 months preparing for this, so why did the air feel like the end of the world? The prime minister drops the final bombshell. This isn't a repeat of last time. This time there are 2 dragons. The color drains from Ein's face as the memory of the kraken being torn apart flashes back with haunting clarity. 1 was a myth, 2 was an apocalypse. If they don't stop them now, Estal will be reduced to a graveyard of sunken rubble. That is why Tina, the nation's premier command master, was sent to lead the suicide mission. Fury erupts in Ein as he demands to know why they would send his precious mentor into such a death trap. The king remains steady, attempting to anchor the boy's spiraling emotions. He explains that it's not just her. The entire royal fleet, nearly every knight in the kingdom, and a legion of elite adventurers have been mobilized. In this dark hour, Joey and the remaining guards are the only ones left to defend the heart of the capital. He insists that they must place their absolute faith in Tina's strength and wait for the signal. Ein clenches his fists until his knuckles turn white. Logically, his grandfather is right. But his heart refuses to accept the cold reality of a waiting game. The primal terror of the sea dragon is still etched into his bones, and his legs begin to shake with the urge to flee. He starts to tremble, the fear threatening to consume him, but he refuses to be a coward any longer. He summons every memory of Tina's kindness, and with eyes burning with newfound resolve, he stares down the king. He admits he is terrified of the monsters in the deep, but losing the person who matters most to him is 1,000 times scarier. With a voice that rings through the hall, he declares his intent to march to Magna and slay the sea dragon himself. The room falls into a stunned silence, shock written across the faces of the king, Joey, and Olivia. The king barks that he's being a reckless fool for even suggesting such a suicidal move. Joey steps in, reminding him that as the crown prince, his life is no longer his own. It is the property of the state. Ein doesn't flinch, arguing that the first king would never have cowered behind walls while his people bled. He refuses to sit in a golden cage while Tina fights for her life. Olivia rushes to his side, pleading with him, desperate to keep her only son away from the jaws of certain death. But despite his mother's tears, the prince's resolve is ironclad. He is going to Magna, and nothing will stand in his way. The king lets out a long, weary sigh, sinking back into his throne. For a heartbeat, Ein thinks he has finally won the argument. But suddenly, a sharp blow from Joey lands on the back of his neck, and the world begins to fade into darkness. The king closes his eyes, forced to use force since words could no longer hold back the prince's spirit. As Joey catches the unconscious boy, the king mutters a heavy apology for the unpleasant task. But the loyal servant simply nods, accepting the burden as part of his duty. Suddenly, Olivia snatches her son from Joey's grip, pulling him close, and lashing out at her father for raising a hand against his own flesh and blood. The king ignores the reproach, ordering Martha to escort Olivia back to her quarters and to bring the unconscious Ein to Katie's high-security workshop. Olivia's screams for her son echo through the halls as the king issues a final, absolute decree. Ein is to be kept under lock and key, with no exceptions and no escape. He must be confined at all costs to prevent him from throwing his life away in Magna. The silence of Katie's workshop is broken by a violent pounding. Ein is awake, hammering against the door and begging for release. He tries to summon his phantom hands to tear the room apart, but his power feels strangled, refusing to manifest. He grits his teeth in a blind rage, haunted by the image of Tina facing two prehistoric titans alone while he sits in a cage. Katie tells him to stop, explaining that the room is encased in a powerful anti-magic seal. To break it, one would need the raw, chaotic power of the Demon King himself. She feels his pain, but she begs him to have faith in the vice-captain's legendary skills. Ein falls to his knees, overwhelmed by his own helplessness, and prays for the strength to save those he loves. Then, that mysterious, ancient voice whispers in his mind again, telling him to look closer at his surroundings. The voice urges him to focus, and he scans the room until his eyes lock onto a specific object. There, on a nearby table, sits the cursed magic stone from the vault. Katie's eyes widen as he lunges for the table. She screams for him to stop as he reaches for the dangerous artifact. With a look of sorrow, he whispers an apology to Katie for the trouble he's about to cause. The moment his fingers graze the stone, his phantom hands erupt from his back with terrifying force. Katie is speechless. He's doing the impossible, using his gifts, within a room designed to nullify all magic. The princess begs him to drop the stone, fearing the cursed energy will devour his soul. Suddenly, her body freezes, pinned by an invisible pressure. Meanwhile, Ein feels a strange, maternal warmth envelop him, as if he's being embraced by a ghost. Katie watches in horror and awe as the prince completely absorbs the entirety of the cursed stone's mana. She begins to scold him for his recklessness, but he's already focused on the barrier. She can't fathom the sheer magnitude of power radiating from him, power enough to shatter the unbreakable seal. Ein kicks the door open and strides out, the sound of Katie's desperate pleas falling on deaf ears. He is met at the exit by a familiar face. Krone is waiting there, as if she knew his spirit could never be caged. She looks at him sadly, knowing that even if she begged him to stay, his heart is already at the sea. Ein meets her gaze with eyes of fire, making a solemn vow to return to her side alive. Krone pulls him close for a brief, soft kiss on the cheek, leaving him momentarily stunned and blushing. She prays for the goddess to shield him and guide him back to her. He looks at her one last time, a warm, determined smile on his face, before sprinting toward the castle gates. The moment he's gone, Krone's composure breaks and the tears finally fall. She looks to the heavens, her heart heavy with prayer. Ein nears the outer perimeter, only to find Joey and a squad of elite knights blocking his path. When they demand to know where he thinks he's going, he simply smirks and tells them he's heading out for a breath of fresh air at the port. Joey released a terrifying surge of pressure that literally cracked the stone floor of the castle, sending a wave of dread through the surrounding knights. Looking like an immovable titan, Joey towered over the young prince, sternly declaring that he would not permit a single step outside those walls. Ein didn't blink. As he continued to defy the order, Joey began to draw his blade to subdue him, but the prince struck first with a blinding burst of power. In an instant, Joey froze mid-motion, as did every knight standing in the hall. Joey realized with a start that he'd been snared by a binding spell so potent it rendered him completely paralyzed. It was clear the prince had awakened a terrifying new level of authority. As Ein calmly walked past the frozen commander, Joey gave one last warning. This choice would become a heavy cross for many people to bear. Ein didn't look back, sprinting away and leaving the silent hall behind. Eventually, Joey shattered the invisible shackles with a roar of pure, raw strength. He panted, telling the knights they'd be free once Ein cleared the perimeter. He couldn't help but chuckle through his exhaustion, remarking that his prince was truly becoming a monster of a man. Ein finally reached the outer gates, his lungs burning as he gasped for air. The world felt impossibly vast now that he was actually out. He debated whether to keep running, or try to hijack a horse from the stables. Suddenly, Dill swept into view on horseback as if he'd anticipated the move, offering to ride straight into the fire by the prince's side. Since the prince was going to be an unstoppable force anyway, Dill decided to be the immovable shield. Ein worried about the trouble this would cause his friend, but Dill was resolute. He wanted to dedicate his life to the prince, and by extension, to the glory of Estal itself. He joked that even if the crown sacked him for this stunt, it would be his life's greatest honor to be hired as the prince's private guard. They kicked the horses into a gallop, and Dill explained the plan. They had to reach White Rose Station to board the Royal Water Train, the only high-speed link to the coast. The catch was the checkpoint. The king had specifically blacklisted the prince for traveling to Magna. Hearing this, Ain't heart sank. Every second they wasted at a gate was another second Tina spent at the edge of a grave. That's when Dill dropped the ultimate gamble, a royal decree. It was an absolute mandate only a royal could invoke, capable of overriding even the king's standing orders. However, the aftermath would be brutal. The council would dissect the decision, and if they found it reckless, Ein would be stripped of his title and banished from the royal bloodline forever. Having laid out the grim reality, Dill admitted he couldn't in good conscience recommend such a path. He urged the prince to look for a safer, less nuclear alternative. But Ein's eyes were like flint. He replied that hesitation was a luxury they didn't have, officially deciding to invoke the decree and seize the train. He thanked Dill for the intel, leaving the guard to let out a heavy sigh at the sheer weight of the dangerous door he had just opened for his master. A short while later, the royal water train whistled, racing across the sea tracks toward the chaos in Magna. Meanwhile, at the front lines, Tina was a whirlwind of steel, leading her knights. In a desperate attempt to slay the gargantuan sea serpents, she bit her lip until it bled, surveying the battlefield where half her battalion had already been swallowed by the waves. Even after landing deep wounds on the beast, it refused to die. If this became a war of attrition, their supplies and lives would vanish into the abyss. Suddenly, the serpent breached the surface again. Tina rallied her units for another salvo. Cannons roared, and mages unleashed a synchronized magical barrage. The monster shrieked in agony as another volley found its mark, seeing the opening. Tina signaled for a final, decisive strike. The heavy cannon boomed, delivering a direct hit that sent shockwaves through the water. The crew gasped in shock as they saw the massive magic stone embedded in the beast's forehead finally crack. The knights erupted in cheers, believing they had finally shattered the source of its power. But Tina's voice cut through the celebration. She reminded them that the ocean hid more than one nightmare and ordered them to maintain battle formation. True to her fears, the serpent lunged from the foam, crushing the primary cannon in its massive jaws. A massive tidal wave followed, threatening to swamp the remaining warships. Even with its core damaged, the beast was using its final moments to drag them all down with it. Tina scanned the churning water, desperately searching for the second monster that had been lurking. In that heartbeat, the shadow she feared loomed directly behind her. She spun around to face the jaws of death. And for a fleeting second, the image of the prince's bright smile filled her mind. Fueled by the need to see him one last time, she drew her sword for a final, suicidal leap. But suddenly, a thick, supernatural mist enveloped the serpent, causing the titan to freeze in confusion. Beyond bewildered, Tina shouted into the haze, demanding to know what kind of magic was at play. A voice replied, explaining the thick mist ability had been used to blind the beast. Tina didn't care about the mechanics. She screamed, demanding to know why the prince was there and ordering him to retreat to the capital instantly. Ein didn't move. Instead, he channeled his royal authority, commanding every soldier on the field to bow and witness. His resolve to slay the beast himself, relegating the elite knights to mere backup. Worried sick Tina asked if he truly grasped the weight of a royal decree. He met her gaze with the eyes of a king, stating that defying the crown prince was a crime and she was bound to obey. Tina saw that look, the expression of a man whose mind was made up, and she knew that no amount of pleading would make him turn back now. Ein ordered Dill to focus on defending the fleet while he engaged the serpent head-on. As if on cue, the monster lunged at the flagship, its jaws wide enough to swallow the deck. He summoned his phantom hands in a roar of power, meeting the Titan's charge. The collision triggered a massive explosion, sending a shockwave across the sea that nearly capsized the ships. Tina screamed through the howling wind, begging the prince to pull back to safety. But Ein poured every ounce of his soul into the clash, miraculously halting the monster's momentum and leaving the veteran soldiers in awe. He flashed a cocky grin, realizing all those brutal hours of sparring with the Red Bison had finally paid off. The phantom hands tore into the serpent's flesh, sending blood spraying into the air as it shrieked. He leaped onto the beast's thrashing head, his eyes frantically searching for the glow of its heartstone. Once he spotted the core, he commanded his spectral claws to begin forcibly draining the magic stone's essence. The monster finally sank, but the struggle dragged Ein deep into the freezing, dark water. Beneath the surface, he realized the serpent still had enough spite to fight back. As a legendary creature, its mana pool was deeper than he had imagined, making it impossible to drain in one go. Left with no other choice, Ein committed to a desperate underwater duel. He parried the beast's thrashing limbs while desperately sucking away its life force. His oxygen was fading. As his own mana reserves hit the red zone, he could feel his consciousness flickering, his strength leaking out into the cold dark. As he began to drift into the abyss, he realized he was holding a massive reservoir of power, the serpent's own core energy. He forcibly pumped that raw, chaotic mana into his own veins, jump-starting his system as he sank toward the seabed. He became a vacuum, absorbing more and more of the serpent's essence to fuel his final strike. His entire body began to convulse under the sheer pressure of the hijacked power surging through him. He was slipping away, but as the darkness of the deep threatened to claim him, he visualized the faces of everyone waiting for him back in Estal and surged forward. His ruby necklace flared with a blinding, divine radiance. With one last effort, he drove his dark dagger deep into the serpent's heart. The impact shattered the magic stone into dust, but the moment the enemy breathed its last, Ein's body went limp and he began to fall. Back on the surface, a final, haunting roar echoed across the waves before silence fell. Dill recognized the sound of a beast's end and looked to Tina for the next command, but he found only her discarded armor lying on the deck. As the news of the double victory spread, the soldiers began to cheer. Tina had dived in and hauled Ein from the depths just in time, before the sea could claim him, but she wept openly as she cradled her broken and bloodied prince. Later, Ein woke up in a soft bed, his vision slowly clearing. He offered a weak, awkward smile to his two frantic servants, trying to joke about his wounds to ease the tension. Tina is absolutely mortified, while Dill looks on in disbelief at the prince's sheer audacity. Despite the carnage, Ein continues to act like his wounds are mere scratches. He jokes that he can barely feel his arms, but is just glad they're still attached, causing Tina to finally snap. She barks that he must never trivialize his life again, as sentiment Dill backs with a grim nod. Ein sighs, admitting he's just grateful to be breathing after that hellish struggle with the sea serpent. He muses that perhaps the heavens were looking out for him. However, Tina's eyes drop to the ornament on his chest, her expression turning somber. She points out that the ruby necklace Warren gave him is shattered. She explains that the gem is a literal lifesaver, designed to shatter only when the wearer is standing at death's door, absorbing a fatal blow in their place. The realization that he was a heartbeat away from death breaks Tina's composure, and she begins to sob uncontrollably, leaving Ein completely blindsided by her emotional outburst. Panicking, Ein fumbles to find the right words and shoots a desperate help me look toward Dill. However, Dill immediately looks the other way, making it clear he has zero intention of getting involved in this emotional minefield. Left with no choice, Ein gently takes Tina's hand as she trembles, her tears falling in heavy drops. Between sobs, she begs him to never throw himself into the jaws of death like that ever again. The weight of her words finally sinks in, and with a look of genuine regret, Ein offers a soft, sincere apology. Then, hoping to lighten the mood, he beams and tells her that the sea serpent's magic stone was a culinary masterpiece, tasting like pure oceanic bliss. They stare at him, stunned that he's already thinking about his stomach. The sheer absurdity of his review finally breaks Tina's sadness, and she bursts into a fit of laughter. A scout interrupts the moment to announce they're nearing the capital. Tina supports the prince, helping him stand as they make their way back toward the ship's main hall. Meanwhile, a shadow falls over Dill's face. He knows that the moment they dock, he will have to answer for the crime of defying the king's direct decree. Yet, as he watches the prince, he realizes that being his shield was worth every bit of the coming storm. He regrets nothing. He stood by his lord when it mattered most, and that pride is a shield no punishment can pierce. The prince stands tall on the pier as the war-torn vessel finally moors. Warren is there to receive them, ushering Ein into a waiting carriage. He warns the boy that the king is holding court at the castle, and his expression is like a brewing storm. Ein nods solemnly, knowing the time for excuses has passed. Back at the palace, Ein stands in the center of the throne room, flanked by Joey and Warren under the king's heavy gaze. With a voice like thunder, the king admits he had plenty of time to contemplate the prince's blatant insubordination. But then his face softens into a proud grin. He declares his grandson a legend for slaying the sea dragon, and the hall erupts in deafening cheers. The dragon's remains alone could fund the nation for 20 years, but more importantly, the people of Magna now view the prince as their divine savior for ending the nightmare. He didn't just win a war. He brought back the majority of the fleet and Tina herself, safe and sound. The king continues his praise, calling the prince's tactical prowess and bravery nothing short of magnificent. However, the king's tone shifts back to sternness. Such glory came at a heavy price of recklessness, including the total loss of the royal water train and a high-ranking noble family's flagship. Furthermore, the king notes that the prince didn't commit these crimes alone. Dill doesn't wait to be summoned. He steps forward, ready to face the music. Joey looks his son in the eye, asking if he's prepared for the fallout. Dill gives a sharp, resolute nod, having accepted his fate long ago. But Ein isn't having it. He steps in front of Dill, shielding his friend from the king's judgment. He invokes his royal authority to take full responsibility for the guard's actions, offering himself up for punishment instead. Dill tries to pull him back, but the prince's resolve is iron. He will not let his friend fall for his sake. Moved by their bond, Joey drops to his knees, begging the king to let the blame fall on his shoulders as the father. He claims he was the one who failed to restrain Ein, and he begged for the penalty to be his alone. The king sighs, then unexpectedly lets out a hearty laugh. He looks at the trio and admits he hasn't the heart to punish such fierce loyalty. He tells them to stand, since his grandson invoked an official royal decree. Dill was legally bound to follow it, absolving him of all guilt. In fact, the king is moved that Dill prioritize the prince's life above all else. Ein kneels in gratitude, and the king hands down his sentence, 2 months of strict house arrest. Ein accepts the light punishment with a relieved heart. But the reshuffling of the guard continues. Joey is punished by being promoted to the king's personal guard, while Tina is officially named the new marshal of the realm, capping off the day's surprises. Exhausted, Ein is about to head for some much-needed sleep when Warren taps him on the shoulder with a sly, warning grin. He reminds the prince that while the king was lenient, Olivia and Krone are waiting in the wings, and they won't be as easy to win over. The hall breaks into laughter at Ein's visible shudder. Later, he's practically speed-walking through the corridors. He finds Krone first, standing alone on a balcony and staring out at the sea with tear-stained eyes. She quickly wipes her face, offering a watery smile and whispering that she never doubted he'd keep his promise. He greets her with a warm, gentle smile, and the floodgates open once more as she realizes he's truly safe. She rushes to him, and he pulls her into an embrace, whispering another apology for the scare. Drying her eyes, she asks if he's faced his mother yet. When he says no, she urges him to go immediately, noting that Olivia's heart has been in a fragile state. He knocks softly on his mother's door, but when no one answers, he slips inside, only to find the room transformed into a literal jungle, dominated by a massive, glowing tree. The floor is a labyrinth of gnarled roots and vines. Suddenly, Olivia scrambles out from the undergrowth, her eyes wild with relief as she sees her son standing there. Stunned, Ein asks what on earth happened to the decor. Olivia, blushing with embarrassment, begs him not to look, explaining she simply lost control of her mana. He realizes then that the stress had forced her latent dryad nature to bloom in a literal sense. She cups his face, checking every inch of him for scars, her hands trembling with maternal worry. In that moment, feeling the warmth of her hands, the hero facade finally cracks. Ein begins to sob, the trauma of the battle finally catching up to him. For the first time since diving into the ocean, he allows himself to feel just how terrifying the ordeal really was. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washes over him. Olivia pulls him into a tight embrace, whispering that he's safe now and that the nightmare is over. She promises he never has to carry that burden alone again. He cries until he has no more tears left, finally finding peace in his mother's arms. Days later, Katie is running a diagnostic on his body. She calls him the world's biggest idiot for absorbing a cursed stone that was strictly forbidden for human contact. After finishing her treatment, she clears him to go, signaling that his physical wounds have finally closed. Feeling a surge of vitality, Ein stretches and declares he's ready to clear out the entire kitchen. Tina immediately volunteers to be his personal nurse and food taster until he's back to 100. Katie agrees, noting that the prince has a dangerous habit of treating his own life like a game of chicken. Before he leaves, she demands a status card, curious to see the numerical evolution. That occurred after he feasted on 2 of the most powerful magic stones in history. He fishes the card from his pocket, realizing he hadn't even looked at it in the heat of the moment. As they crowd around the card, the numbers that flash before them are nothing short of godlike. It's a statistical anomaly, but it makes sense. He's essentially carrying the mana of a cursed relic and an ancient sea god. However, Ein pouts, complaining that he expected even bigger gains. Katie nearly loses it, calling him a lunatic for wanting more when his stats are already breaking the world's logic. He ignores her rant, pointing to a new entry. What's this job I've acquired? She checks it and nearly faints. It's a legendary monster-class title earned from the sea serpent soul. He's basically inherited the ocean's apex predator abilities. But then his eyes drift to another entry, Archmage. Katie's jaw hits the floor at the mention of that class. That's a title reserved for ancient, high-level witch monsters who have mastered the forbidden arts of primordial magic. They realize then that the cursed stone wasn't just a rock. It was a relic of the ancient witches. Tina chimes in, noting that if it were a normal witch, it would just say mage, but Archmage points to something far darker, an ancient lich. Katie asks how she could possibly know that, and Tina reveals she's been sneak reading Katie's ancient research books. She admits she can read the elven script inside and offers a very clumsy apology for the snooping. Katie explodes in a mix of rage and joy, screaming that she's been killing herself translating that book when a translator was standing right next to her. She shakes Tina by the shoulders, demanding to know what it says about the Lich. Tina points to a passage, translating. The ancient Lich was the bride of a legendary Dullan. They were the power duo that founded the very bedrock of the Demon Kingdom during the Great War. The room falls silent as they realize the two magic stones, Ein 8, were actually a husband and wife reunited. Katie notices an illustration in the book that looks identical to Ein's black dagger. Tina reads further, confirming the dagger was the Lich's own creation, forged from a literal shard of her own soul. The text says she gifted this soul blade to her husband, the Dullahan, as a token of eternal devotion. It was a weapon designed to match the destructive power of a demon king's own blade. That explains why such a small dagger was able to punch through the sea serpent's nigh impenetrable hide. Katie finally understands. The stones were the spirits of the Dullahan and his wife. Ein looks at his hands, humbled by the thought of carrying a couple's eternal bond within him. He remembers the moment he absorbed them, the sudden, strange warmth that filled his chest, as if the two lovers had finally found their way home to each other through him. At that precise moment, a sharp knock echoes through the room. Someone is looking for Tina. Krone steps inside, worried she's interrupted the prince's recovery, but Tina quickly asks for her report. The August Company has sent word from the docks where the dragon is being harvested. They need Tina and Joey on site immediately. Krone hesitates for a second, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief before dropping a bombshell. She reveals that a pair of mysterious eggs was discovered deep within the sea dragon's massive carcass. The group rushes to the port, finding the area swarming with workers dismantling the fallen titan. Graf is in the thick of it, barking orders to the laborers when he spots the high-ranking officials, approaching with a full escort of royal knights in tow. Joey offers a brief apology for the delay, but the old merchant simply waves it off, grateful they could make it at all. Ein pops out from behind the group, eyes sparkling as he asks if the rumors about the eggs are true. The marshal admits he's never seen anything like it. Leading the way, the merchant pulls back a heavy canvas tarp, leaving the entire group breathless. Two colossal eggs sit there, their shells so translucent you can see the silhouettes of tiny dragons shifting inside. Suddenly, a sharp crack rings out. The shells are splintering. Tina's instincts flare, and she instantly commands her knights to draw their steel. And the soldiers raise their blades, their hearts hammering against their ribs. The tension is thick. Protocol dictates they keep a safe distance from these unknown predators. Ein tries to calm the room, realizing just how much everyone fears the potential threat. The two commanders shift into a combat stance as the fractures spiderweb across the eggshells. A tiny blue spike punches through the surface, and two adorable baby dragons emerge, chirping happily as they blink at the sunlight for the first time. The sight leaves the hardened warriors completely speechless, especially as the hatchlings tumble clumsily onto the wooden docks, their tiny legs wobbling as they struggle to find their balance. Logically, a warrior would say you never leave a future threat alive, but Ein looks at them with soft eyes, wondering how anyone could harm such defenseless creatures. Joey, however, isn't moved by cuteness. He looms over the hatchlings, his hand tightening on his hilt. Even though they were just born, the baby dragons begin to shiver, sensing the killing intent radiating from the night. The scene is too cruel for Ein to watch, so he steps forward and tells Joey to stand down. Before anyone can stop him, the prince walks right up to the apex predators without a single tremor of fear. He drops to his knees to meet the tearful, shivering babies at eye level, flashing a warm, radiant smile. That is so comforting, the hatchlings immediately burst into joyful chirps. To the shock of the onlookers, the offspring of the world's most feared monster nuzzle into the prince's arms like puppies. He figures they must sense the sea dragon's mana he absorbed, instinctively recognizing him as their father. The commanders have the power to end them in a heartbeat. Even the standard guards could finish the job, while the creatures are this small. Knowing this, Ein makes a plea. Give him just 24 hours before they decide their fate. He's betting he can convince his grandfather to let him keep these deadly threats as pets. Later, in a secluded garden behind the palace, Ein and Krone sit peacefully by a bubbling brook. The two little dragons are there too, happily munching through a pile of high-grade magic stones. Ein watches them with a grin, amazed by their bottomless pits for stomachs. It took some serious negotiating to get the king's blessing, but luckily, the old man caved. He names the energetic blue brother Al, and his slightly more composed older sister Hel. The duo chirps with delight as Krone feeds them each another shimmering crystal. Ein finds himself distracted, staring at the gentle, maternal warmth Krone radiates while tending to them. She catches him blushing and tilts her head, asking if there's something on his face. He tries to look away and play it cool. But Krone is sharp. She already has a pretty good guess why he's turning red. With a playful glint in her eyes, she holds out a magic stone to him, teasing that he looked so hungry watching the dragons eat that he might want a snack too. He laughs at the joke, leaning into the bit and remarking how delicious the mana smells. As night falls, King Silva visits his grandson to check on his recovery. Ein flexes his arm, proudly declaring he's fit enough to get back to his sword drills. He jokingly complains that he can brush his own hair, but Olivia won't let go of the brush, insisting on doting on him. It seems even the hero who saved the nation is powerless against a mother's stubborn love. The king turns serious, noting that Ein's period of house arrest is coming to an end, and a major royal responsibility is already waiting for him. He is officially appointed as the king's personal envoy to the nation of Hilo. The trade of sea crystals Olivia initiated with them has been a massive boost to the economy, since those stones power nearly every tool in Estal. Maintaining this alliance is the kingdom's top priority. If the king went himself, it would trigger a diplomatic frenzy, so the crown prince must go as his face. Warren will handle the fine print of the treaties, while Tina and Dill lead the elite guard for his protection. It's a powerful team, yet Ein worries that taking the best knights might leave the capital vulnerable. The king acknowledges the boys' tactical foresight, but admits his real fear is Ein doing something traditionally reckless on his very first diplomatic trip. Ein feels the massive weight of representing the royal bloodline abroad. Despite the pressure, a surge of excitement and nervous energy bubbles up inside him. Deep in the castle, Katie is hunched over her desk while Tina snoozes nearby. She's meticulously translating the ancient tome, stopping abruptly when she hits a chilling passage. The page depicts Ash, the demon lady of envy, a figure of pure legend. Looking at the portrait, Katie muses that she looks far too elegant to be the monster who razed cities. The text hints at a tragic truth. Her legendary rage was actually sparked by a stinging betrayal. The ancient war was a bloodbath that only ceased when she and her two generals, the Dullahan and the Lich, were slain. Yet, their combat logs were bizarre. Despite being her strongest assets, the two generals acted. Strangely, the Dullahan never charged. He simply stood his ground, waiting for the heroes to come to him. The Lich focused entirely on defensive illusions and stalling, rather than lethal offensive spells. They had the power to wipe out humanity, but they never truly seemed interested in the slaughter. Then there's the mystery of the third shadow, the advisor who never left the demon lady's side, a humanoid figure known only as the Red Fox Woman. The records show that the demon lady only became truly violent after this fox woman appeared. She remains a total enigma in history, known only as a chaotic hedonist who lived for the thrill of manipulating and deceiving mortals. Scholars now suspect she was the true puppet master behind Ash's descent into madness. Katie stares at the silhouette of the fox, a chill running down her spine. She realizes a very similar fox deity is currently worshipped in Hilo. Just then, Tina bolts upright, having fallen asleep mid-sentence during the translation work. The princess tells her to get some real sleep, especially since her big trip is coming up. When Tina mentions they're heading to Hilo, Katie freezes, her mind racing back to the book. She can only pray that their visit to the neutral city of Berlin doesn't turn into a nightmare. The stadium roars with excitement as the championship match reaches its climax in the arena. Logos bellows with the spirit of a true warrior, swinging his massive blade with crushing force. But Edward is like a shadow, effortlessly ducking under the lethal arc of the sword. The opening is small, but Logos doesn't miss it, pressing his advantage while his opponent is off balance. The spearman barely catches the blow on his shaft. He's alive, but the sheer force leaves his arms vibrating. The old veteran grins admitting that Logos has packed on some serious muscle since their last bout. To the general, that praise sounds suspiciously like a taunt. Taking the bait, he lunges forward, determined to end the stalemate. Edward chuckles, remarking that taking hits like that is starting to get a bit too taxing for his old bones. So the old master doesn't bother parrying. He simply dances around every strike. Leaping high into the air, he finds his opponent's blind spot and puts every ounce of strength into a final spear throw. Aimed directly at Logos' center mass. The sheer force of the impact nearly knocks the wind out of him, pinning him to the dirt. Before he can even blink, a blade is pressed against his throat. And just like that, Edward of Hilo is crowned victor. He extends a hand to pull his rival up, flashing a grin over another legendary bout. The general sighs, wondering if the day will ever come when he can actually best the man. Grint and Cammy watch from the sidelines. And the boy is in total shock that his father, the god of war of Heim, was actually defeated. He turns to his mother, vowing to one day settle the score. She just smiles, her eyes full of dark expectations. After all, he's the golden child, the one blessed with a rare holy knight skill. They're determined to prove he can wield that divine power better than Shannon ever could. Meanwhile, in a distant mansion, a fist repeatedly slams into a wall in a fit of pure rage. Tiger, the third prince of Heim, wears a permanent scowl. His advisors beg him to stay calm, noting the periodic report is due any minute, but he snarls back, asking how he's supposed to relax, when his beloved Krone has been missing for 3 agonizing years. He demands to know how Harley, the man standing before him, can stay so composed when it's his own daughter who's gone. With a polite bow, Harley admits that he and his wife, Elena, have been drowning in sorrow every single day. However, as a father and a loyal subject, he insists on maintaining his strength for the prince's sake. Tiger realizes he crossed a line and acknowledges that the parents must be the ones suffering the most. Harley's mind drifts back to his secret pact with Graf. They had both agreed Krone would be far safer in Estal away from the political vultures. Still, he never imagined his daughter would fall so deeply in love in the span of a single night. Back then, she had been unyielding, demanding they let her go to be by his side. The old grandfather simply couldn't say no to her heart's desire. He wonders if he's turning her into a spoiled princess, but they figure it a small price for her happiness. In the present, Tiger paces like a caged predator, leaving Harley, with no choice but to silently apologize for the prince's one-sided obsession. Suddenly, a guard bursts in with a lead. They've tracked the last carriage and in use by the fugitives. He bellows the news that the targets are currently making a move toward Hilo. Ecstatic, Tiger orders a full-scale mobilization to intercept them immediately. Tiger turns to the father with a predatory glint in his eye, declaring that the day he finally reclaims his bride is just around the corner. Harley bows, offering hollow gratitude and promising that Krone and Graf will show their thanks the moment they're safely brought back. Sensing victory, the prince formally asks for Krone's hand in marriage. Though he knows the truth, Harley keeps his mask on and fuels the prince's delusional dreams. Tiger decides to oversee the hunt in Hilo personally, summoning an aide. He orders that the talented young Grint be added to his personal vanguard. The image of Krone's ethereal beauty haunts his thoughts. Desperate to possess her, he swears he'll hunt her to the ends of the earth. The hidden gears of destiny begin to grind, slowly pulling these estranged rivals into a head-on collision. In the Principality of Hilo, Edward and Duke Amor are left gaping at the sheer, majestic size of the arriving vessel. It's the personal flagship of King Silva himself. Suddenly self-conscious, the Duke frantically asks if his clothes are straight, only to be told to keep his cool and act like a leader. The Estal honor guard marches off the ship, flanking the ramp in a perfect display of discipline. Everyone holds their breath until Ein finally emerges with his elite circle, offering a perfectly measured greeting to the hosts, and introducing himself as the king's proxy. Despite his youth, the boy radiates the aura of a seasoned monarch. The tension in the air evaporates, replaced by mutual respect and the hope for a legendary alliance. Amor, eager to please, offers to personally escort the royal party to the palace. As Ein takes a quiet breath to steady his nerves, Edward watches him intently and asks if he's feeling all right. Edward admits he's actually worried for the prince's enemies, Looking at the boy, he sees a colossal monster lurking behind a small frame. He muses that while Tina might win a sparring match in a true fight to the death, the boy is a different beast entirely. Beyond just raw power, he wonders what other terrifying secrets the young royal is hiding. The parties settle into a private chamber to begin the high-level negotiations. But the peace is shattered by a loud, arrogant voice from the hallway. Tiger has just crashed the meeting without an invitation. The Heim Prince complains about being kept waiting, even though he didn't even have an appointment on the books. He claims his intrusion is official business, brandishing a letter from the King of Heim. Warren stays calm, letting him present it, only for Ein to lock eyes with the guard holding the letter. It's his brother, Grint. Grint is just as shocked, pointing an accusatory finger at his own flesh and blood, exposing him as the failure who ran away from the Roundheart house. The temperature in the room drops to sub-zero, leaving the uninformed officials staring in absolute bewilderment. Ein, however, doesn't flinch. He simply offers a casual greeting to the brother he hasn't seen in years. He signals Dill and Tina to stand down, despite their hands twitching toward their hilts. The prince won't be the one to draw first blood. Deciding that the intrusion is too urgent to ignore, Ein gives Tiger the floor to speak. Amor is confused by the power dynamic, but bites his tongue and follows Ein's lead. Grint barks at the room, outraged that anyone would dare speak to a Prince of Heim with such lack of respect. Ein fires back that as the crown prince of Estal, he's the one who should be demanding an apology for this disrespect. His younger brother can only seethe, his face twisting with repressed anger. With a single, bone-chilling command, Ein silences his brother, his sheer kingly pressure forcing the boy into submission. Moving on, the group demands to know the real reason for this ambush. Clutching his chest dramatically, Tiger announces he's on a crusade to find his stolen bride, Krone August. The room goes deathly quiet, the air becoming thick and suffocating, especially for the Estal delegation who know exactly where she is. Tiger weaves a tale of how Krone and her grandfather vanished in a hilo just as trade with Estal began. He connects the dots with a venomous smirk, accusing Hilo of human trafficking to win Estal's favor. It's a declaration of diplomatic war, and Amor frantically denies such a disgusting claim. But being called a villain is a hard pill to swallow, especially when an ally is watching. Echoing the Duke, Warren steps forward, making it clear that Estal has no stomach for such vile trade. Tiger snarls, demanding to know who this commoner is. Warren introduces himself as the Prime Minister of Superpower, still dripping with arrogance. Tiger orders the minister to start a manhunt for the missing Heim citizens. Warren's eyes sharpen like daggers as he asks if this is supposed to be a business deal, reminding the prince that their nations haven't been on speaking terms for years. In short, why should Estal waste a single copper on a country that isn't even a trade partner? He points out that Heim has a nasty habit of breaking promises, making their word worth nothing. If they want Estal's help, they're going to have to pay a massive upfront service fee. Warren is masterfully pushing Tiger's buttons, but the desperate prince actually asks what the price for his bride will be. The Prime Minister calmly asks for the head of General Logos, knowing full well it's an impossible demand. Since Logos is the backbone of Heim's military, the request is a deliberate slap in the face. Warren declares the deal dead on arrival. Grint is vibrating with sheer fury. He loses his cool, screaming that his older brother is still just as petty and pathetic as the day he left. Dill looks ready to commit a massacre, but his restraint allows Grint to keep digging his own grave, calling the prince a gutless figurehead who hides behind his staff. Finally, Ein's personal guard snaps, the air around him boiling with pure, unfiltered hostility. To Dill, Ein is the godslayer who took down a sea dragon single-handedly. Grint scoffs, unable to see past his own childhood arrogance and the weak image of the brother he used to bully, only to be told that his tiny perspective is exactly why he'll always be a small-time noble. That's the final straw. Both Heim royals are now red-faced and shaking with homicidal rage. The tension in the room is a powder keg, waiting for a single spark to blow the whole palace sky high. Deciding to turn this chaos into a productive outlet, Warren makes a proposal, a formal training duel. Ein looks worried about where this is heading, but it's a perfect way to settle the score and show Heim exactly who they're dealing with. In the middle of the grand, echoing hall of Hilo's castle, the two combatants locked eyes with murderous intent, ready to paint the floor red. The rhythmic ring of steel against steel echoed through the chamber, punctuated by the ragged, heavy breathing of the duelists. The Estal delegation watched in stunned silence, clearly not expecting the power gap between the two to be this astronomical. Dill stood tall, staring down at a gasping Grint, who looked like he was about to suffocate under the sheer pressure of the fight. Though the young guard was already considered an elite talent, his recent training had clearly pushed his swordsmanship into a god-tier realm. Ein watched with a furrowed brow, silently relieved that Dill was showing restraint despite the clear disparity in their ages. Tiger, on the other hand, was losing his mind, screaming at the boy and demanding to know why he was failing. Grint could only glare at his relentless opponent. With a subtle, approving nod from the Prime Minister, Dill realigned his stance and casually invited the boy to come at him for another round. Grint, snarling at the arrogance of the gesture, finally unleashed his trump card, the legendary Holy Knight skill. The room shifted into high alert as the air crackled with divine energy, far exceeding the initial terms of the sparring match. Without warning, the boy charged, his blade glowing with a lethal light. Dill's eyes narrowed as he focused on the incoming strike. The two blurred past each other in a final, decisive exchange, coming to a halt on opposite sides of the training grounds. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Grint's legs gave out, and he crumpled face first onto the cold floor. The referee immediately called the match, declaring Dill the victor. The guard approached Ein, dropping to one knee to offer the win to his master. He hoped the defeat would humble the boy and make him regret his insults, though deep down, he knew the brat was too stubborn for that. Still, no one could deny the raw, terrifying potential hidden within that young holy knight. To most warriors, that title represents the absolute peak of power, a pinnacle many spend lifetimes trying to reach. The boy had mistaken them for mere sky knights, but he was told to go ask his father if he wanted to know the true depth of their strength. Breaking the heavy silence, Warren began to clap, claiming the magnificent display of skill had truly moved his heart. With the bloodlust finally settled, he signaled to Duke Amor that it was time to get back to their high-stakes diplomacy. Before moving on, however, he cast one more look at Tiger, the Prince of Heim. He hinted that he possessed a crucial piece of information regarding the whereabouts of the Lady Krone. With a fake polite apology, he promised to send the full dossier later, leaving the desperate prince trembling with anticipation. Ein watched the exchange in silence, wondering what kind of tactical lie or half-truth the minister was about to drop. Would he reveal her secret life in Estal or her growing bond with Ein? The prince muttered that he'd prefer to keep his personal life under wraps, causing his guards to chuckle. Later that night, Tiger clutched the secret documents, his face contorting with a mix of fury and shock as he read the truth about his beloved Krone. Meanwhile, the official talks between Hilo and Estal moved at light speed, with both nations finding common ground to forge a legendary, mutually beneficial alliance. The delegation even toured the crystal mines to witness the raw sea stones being excavated, once the ink was dry on the treaties. Ein and Tina were finally granted some downtime to explore. Standing on a balcony overlooking the bustling capital, Tina asked why he was so obsessed with surveying the commoner's district. He explained that a true ruler studies the streets to see what the people lack, and he had found exactly what he was looking for. Echoing a strategy Warren had mentioned, Ein proposed a massive wheat trade deal with the principality. Because Hilo's soil is plagued by the salty sea breeze, their farms are tiny, forcing them to rely on expensive imports to survive.